Alright, let's get this started here. I need to get my... Oh, I have many things to get in order here. Give me a second here, guys. Need to get a PowerPoint up so you guys can hear me talking. And I need to get all the other stuff up. Let's use this one here. All right. Looks good. Probably do some killer coda. There we go. All right. So where are we at here? Music might be just a little louder than I like it, so give me 1 second here. Bump that down just a little bit there. Alright, music's out of the way. I can find all of you guys here and transition over to here. Alright, good. Go off of studio mode so you guys can see, and I will put my chat right. I don't know, right there's good. So, what does the title say for the stream today? And I'm back on Twitch and YouTube. I haven't been on YouTube for a while because we've been working so heavily on the Professional Linux Users Group. We have a big meeting that we do once a year. And we really got in there and did a lot of Linux, did a lot of, I don't know, systems engineering, systems administration, software engineering. There was so much stuff going on. There were some good security sessions. If you missed it, we really didn't record anything because the reason was we wanted to make sure that the people that were there could speak candidly. And going forward, we will maybe have some kind of thing where we do some recorded sessions with that. But really, the stuff down in Discord, you got to be there for the most part. All right. Enzo Bear was definitely there for most of it, and I definitely appreciate you coming. Let's get into what we're doing today. So, what I wanted to do was kind of step back and go back into just Linux, right? Like Linux for the enterprise, Linux for the beginner. You know, you've never done any Linux before professionally, but you want to get there. That's kind of what I'm going to work on today. So even in the title, it says we're doing like beginner Linux, evaluating yourself and getting into the command line. So the days when I started Linux, you used to have to go and install Linux. In fact, all the lugs when I was kind of coming up through the ranks were Linux Users Group. All of those were designed to make you go install your own version of Linux, which is kind of, you know, where a lot of this came from. In fact, our Linux Users Group is modeled after that, except I don't think you have to install Linux first. I think you can get into Linux. I think you can get into the command line and understand these things. And then we go back and then we learn all the architecture. Like, if I started off a talk and I said beginner Linux and then we just dug into like what the kernel's doing, that wouldn't be useful to hardly anybody. That would be useful to some people that have been doing this a long time. So yeah, so let's get into this. If anybody wants to do these labs with me as I kind of talk through these things and work through these, I'm going to drop them right here for you both. So it's on the Twitch side and the YouTube. Yeah, Enzo, I really do think people put a lot of effort into it. In fact, I tried to ask most of the guys that talked and said like, hey, what was your lead time on this? How much time did you give? Because I know like my brother Tom spent a better part of a week getting ready for a lot of it. And then I know some of the other guys, they were like, oh man, shoot, Scott's got this thing coming up. I got to be ready for it. So yeah, there was a good amount of like work that went into that for the different people. Hold on, I'm modifying my thing over here. Enzo, you said his talk is on your top 3. Nice. My brother actually texted me today and he said I watched the videos and then I got really lazy. And he said, I didn't go to most of the other sessions, but I heard that my buddy really liked yours. And I was like, yes. Because mine, guys, like I'd sit here and talk Linux all day, right? I do Linux all day. And when I talk at the Professional Linux Users Group, for this one time, I don't talk any Linux. It's all just systems engineering and engineering in general, communication as an engineering concept, that kind of stuff. So what you're going to see on the left here is a Linux terminal, right? We're in a Linux shell of some type that we were given by Killer Coda. They dropped us down in. We can see the shell that we're in, right? So shell is bash. You're going to hear bash a lot. That's the born again shell. We are some user. I can see the user here. I can say who am I can say ID, and there's some mismatch there. There's some things that are different, which has to do with how we were connected and some other things, and that's fine for right now. Just suffice it to say, for now, I have the powers of root. I can do anything I want on the system. In fact, I can check what permissions I have on the system like this. I can run all commands. There's nothing that stops me from doing anything. The sudo tends to be, I kind of think of the sudo command as kind of like one of those, double opening doors that like it kind of controls who can and can't do certain things. And in this case, I can do whatever I want on this box. We could prove that a few other ways, but for now, that's going to work for us. And what we're going to do is we're going to walk through this little Linux evaluation that I have. So when I used to work at AAA back in the day, I was the lead of the Linux engineering team. We call it mid-range Unix, but whatever. It's because we had Unix before we had Linux. And my boss and I treated our NOC, we treated them as like the minor leagues. And you say, what do you mean by that? Well, what I meant is they were the people we would prefer to hire from than to hire people from outside of the organization. Because here's the thing about workers. I'm convinced most people can do Linux. I'm convinced most people could do any of this computer stuff. But I understand the business side of it, that we want to find somebody that's a known quantity. Like, we know this person does work. We know this person updates their documentation. Like, that's better than just hiring somebody. In fact, if you guys look in the industry, a lot of people right now, they hire you as like contract to hire, like contract for 6 months or something, and then they'll convert you over to a hire or whatever. And that kind of sucks that the industry's gone that way, but I get it. Like, a business is hiring you to do data analytics, and you can't do data analytics, so now they got to fire you, and it takes all this resources and stuff. It's easier to just cut a contractor out, So anyways, there's that. Nick Hill over on YouTube, how's it going? So you guys got the link if you want to do this with me. This over here on the right, the Linux evaluations, is a thing that I used to do internally at AAA. In fact, this is the same model. I've just modified the docs a little bit. And we would go through this. I would sit with the teams. We'd take like an hour, kind of like a lunchtime learning, or maybe even an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I would give them this and walk them through this. Now, there are a bunch of questions that come up throughout it. There's a bunch of things that I ask you to do. They could take that and they could return it to me in any way that they wanted to. So they could take this doc, they could pretty it up, they could write all the answers, they could do whatever, and that helped us decide who we wanted to bring from these other teams into the Unix team, right? And you might say, well, not everybody wants to do Unix or Linux, right? Well, no, not everybody does, but these people that would sit in this thing with me, and we'd have anywhere between like 2 and 8 people or so, because it's kind of a smaller team, and obviously you do it over lunch, so you're not, and you can't have all the coverage out of your network operations center. So I would give this, and this is what I would tell them. You need to be able to get in a system. I used to give them their own Red Hat box. I could just produce servers and give them to them. It was super easy to do in my old environment. And I just need them to have PuTTY, so they would just get in on the system. And I would tell them Google's allowed at any time. In fact, it's encouraged. And I wrote this before AI stuff. I'm fine with AI stuff. Because in the context of what we're going to do, you need to still do the command. Right, so like if you want to go send the little AI out, or the little chatbot or the LLM to do some junior engineer work, even though you're a junior engineer at this point, right? If you want to do that and allow that communication to come back to you and give you a little color commentary on what you're doing, I think that's great. If you want it to like parse down the man page for you and tell you something better than the summary at the top, I mean, who am I to judge, right? Do whatever you want. Also, Control Byte, how's it going? Yeah, Control Bind. I'm sure you've got stories of teams that you're on hiring people that weren't necessarily a good fit, and then now you're stuck with them. You know, you got to do something with them. So, all right, and then worth noting before stating any command, you can use man command to read about the manual, and you can man make dir, and then you can hit Q to exit it. Control C can break just about anything. It doesn't work with Q as a common escape character. And then copying and pasting from this document is not encouraged. This document exists in some form up on our Discord. I don't know exactly where it is. So just suffice it to say that if you're doing this along with me and you're doing the labs, you could just write down whatever you wanted to out of here. You could, I tell people if you're doing this stuff with us, take notes, right? Take notes. But again, this is somewhere up in the Discord, the ProLug Linux evaluations. But anyway, so here's the start of the evaluation, right? We're in some lab. We're at a command line doing something. Yeah, Control Bind. I think it really is. Like, you got to spend a lot of time. Have you ever looked at, like, all the ways, like, the C-level, the C-suite people get like, 10 rounds of interviews, and sometimes they'll fly them out and have them, like, walk around and see what they think, and what's your first 30-day, 60-day, 90-day implementation plan, and there's in fact, I know I did poorly on that one time, because I actually, I think some of you guys know, I had made the choice one day that I was going to go into management. This was a few years ago. We were talking about it. It kind of became a joke on our Discord. But I had said, like, oh, fuck it, I'll go to management if they're going to pay me a whole bunch, because I was going to go be the red team manager for my company. And then some of you guys know that they hired the architect instead, and then he said, Scott, come be my team lead. So that's why I was the red team lead over at AAA for 6 months. And then what happened there was my manager's manager and my manager got fired, and I was reporting to the CISO, and I'm like, this is not good. So I left on my terms, but it was kind of wild. So, all right. Yeah. Which on the flip side, leverage ask for promotion. Fair enough. Yeah, it does cost a lot to replace people for sure. Nick Hill, you switched from Ubuntu to Fedora as your main workstation. I think that's valuable. I think there's some good, probably some good value there for the industry for sure, because Fedora is going to be a lot more Red Hat-ish, at least as far as how you install things and do stuff. All right, so we're here. We're at a terminal, and I just start with, it's actually funny, this evaluation right here, if any of you have ever done Lab 4 of our original labs, we had like 12 original labs that we had with the ProLug. Lab 4 is called Operate Running Systems. This exactly comes from that, in fact. So, our first evaluation, let's gather some information about our system. Let's say hostname. We're going to find that this system is called Ubuntu. Well, that's interesting. Normally in our environment on Killer Coda, we're using a 2-node environment, so we got control plane and node 01, but in this case, no, we just got hostname Ubuntu. And then from that, I could ask people, like, let's say somebody just got that really quick, and they're like, well, that's the host name of the system. I'd say, well, where do you think that's set? Where do you guys think that gets set on a system? Do you think it's different on different types of systems? Like I'm on a Ubuntu server right now, right? That's actually the next question. I'm on Ubuntu 2404 system. So where does Ubuntu set the host name? I'm not actually exactly sure. But no, Enzo Bear, Etsy hosts is all the mappings of hosts, but your host name, your definition of your host name is actually somewhere else. But I don't actually know an Ubuntu right off. Like I don't know. I'd have to go look. It might be an Etsy host name. It might be there. But also I can man host name CTL typically if host name if I could spell. By the way, you can typically hit tab. And now this would tell me about the hostname CTL that actually goes and sets it. And what I want to look for in here is probably, I'll look for Etsy. So / will search forward through one of these man pages for me. And it didn't find it. So I might say hostname. Well, that's not great because that's a search that's just very non-specific. But maybe I say set. Set may have less things. But then maybe, well, that doesn't show me much either. So maybe I need to go find, maybe it's not going to be found in here, but I'm pretty sure it's in Etsy hostname. That's where a lot of systems do it. But in RHEL systems, it can also be set down in like Etsy sysconfig Etsy sysconfig can have hostname in there as well on rel systems. So it's like there's these different places that these kind of things can be, and I can go read about that a little bit. And then I might ask them again with this cat hostname or cat, here, this one, Etsy Splat release. I might say, what's in there? Like, what version of Ubuntu am I on? Maybe I might like look at this and say, what do you think LTS means? What do you guys think LTS means? Like, if you've never done support or something. Hold on real quick, Tommy's. Oh, okay. Yeah, sorry, my brother messaged me. I didn't get it, and he's already gone. So he was dropping something out. He only lives like a mile from me. So, anyways, what do you guys think? I mean, like if and again, you don't even have to type these to me. You could just think these to yourself. As again, this is your own personal evaluation, right? Up here, this is your evaluation. I'm not really testing any of you guys for any open positions or anything, but you might think through to yourself, like, do I understand what some of these things mean? Maybe I need to dig into this a little more. Maybe I need to spend more time. You know, maybe you spend 4 hours a night video gaming, and you should only spend 3. Maybe I don't know. You know, you got to find your own balance, guys. Right? That's on you. But for me, like I'm just trying to give you guys a little light to kind of compare, and bounce some of this off of. So if anybody's here later, here's the message. I'll pin that on the Twitch side, and I guess I can pin the message on the YouTube side as well. So we see here that we're on Ubuntu 2404.1 LTS. LTS tends to mean long-term support, and that to the industry tends to mean something around the effect of like 8 to 10 years of support if you're on this. And you say, well, what the heck's support? Well, it tends to mean that you're going to get bug fix, security, and errata. Those are the 3 types of support, or the 3 types of fixes that tend to come out. We're gonna get bug fixes on things that are, you know, released and then understood as like a bug. You're gonna get the errata and those kind of things, and then you're going to get the security updates as well. Hector, how's it going? Thanks for the bits. Hopefully this stuff's useful to you. We are just going through, you know, like an evaluation that I've given to kind of junior people in the company from different teams that work kind of adjacent to the Linux team. And honestly, some people got hired through this process. We brought some people over to work with us because they, one, expressed it. They had to express that they wanted to move to a different team. A lot of people do. You know, you don't want to work in the trenches forever. And, yeah, we, you know, this is kind of like a little assessment that I would give them, and I would talk them through this just like I'm talking you through it. They would do it, and then they would turn this back into me. You guys don't have to turn this back into me. This is for you, right? But what are some of these other things? So I've got this command uname. I never heard of that command before right now. And I type in uname, and it tells me I'm on Linux. And I was like, well, I'm talking to the Linux guys, so I'm probably on Linux. And maybe I do a uname-a, and that gives me a whole bunch of information. But then maybe I find out that I can get like less information, but more, let's call it more precise information. And when we talk about any type of precision in engineering, we start to talk about usefulness, right? And the usefulness of the information really starts to shoot up as you scope down to exactly like uname-r. If you go find like an installer script for probably anything, if we took apart the installer script for like K3s, which we sometimes install on these and then run K3s, you would find that one of the things it does is it does a uname-m, and then it runs a case statement, and it checks with the switch case logic the version, and then some of the versions are not supported. If you're running the wrong architecture of chip, you can't run certain things. That makes sense, right? I mean, it makes sense that like if I had a certain type of, you know, if I had a certain type of tires, I couldn't put them on certain vehicles. Like I can't swap the tires between a Lamborghini and like a Jeep. It doesn't make any sense. But it's useful to know, like, this is a component. This is a thing you're going to get asked. If you have to go put in, like, let's say you're a junior admin and there's something wrong with your systems and, you know, let's say this is more of like a junior engineering thing, and now you're trying to build out a system, but you can't get something to work. Documentation says it should work. You've maybe read some blogs, and maybe you've even done your own testing, and you're trying to get a proof of concept or a little like minimum viable product up, and you can't get it to work, but it's supposed to work. The documentation all says it works. So you put in a ticket with the vendor, right? The people who sold it to your company, that this thing works this way. And the two things they're going to ask you guys, I'm just telling you, this is so prevalent that you might as well just include this in your initial ticket. They're going to ask you to give them all this information right here, the cat Etsy Splat release, and they're going to ask you for the version of the kernel you're on, 100% of the time, every time. They may ask you a bunch of other specific questions too. They may ask, hey, this is a network-based storage device. How are you trying to connect? Are you using NFS version 3 or 4? There's all kinds of other questions that can kind of be derived from the type of thing you're doing. But I'm telling you, like, two questions that are just like immutable. They're like grayed out. Like, they're always going to be there. Are these two right here? What's the kernel that you're on, and what is the version of the OS as the OS sees itself, right? By the way, real quick, something about this. I cheated a little bit here, and we're not going into very in-depth what we're doing, but you saw me cat Etsy, and that asterisk means anything. It's a greedy, it's a glob, right? It's a greedy splat against anything released. So I actually cheated there. And if you were like, well, Scott, what file or files did you actually read? There's a way to figure that out. We could take that same command and just change it back here. Change the cat, which was going to look at the file. And now we can see what's a long listing, in fact, of all the files that actually found. So it found two files. One is Etsy LSB-release, right? So here it is. And the other one is Etsy OS-release, but that's not even really a file. That's actually a soft link to one directory up, user lib OS-release. Let me show that to you real quick. So I can cat Etsy LSB release. That's the first part. And the second part is up one from Etsy in user lib OS release. Right? So those are the two files that I catted. I just cheated and catted them next to each other. There's a lot of ways to do this and a lot of things you could do, I guess, if you were interested in them. But right there, I've got a good amount of information about this system. And the scenario I often give you guys is you get called out in the middle of the night and you've never been on one of these systems before. Some other junior engineer or some other senior engineer is gone and you're the on-call, and it's time to work and figure something out. And one of the first things I always do on a system, there's a few things that I always do on systems. I do an uptime. I do a cat Etsy Splat release. I do a uname-r just to align myself. When I've worked at different companies over the probably last 10 years, you were typically on RHEL 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9. Now 10's there, but 10's still probably in testing for most companies. But any more nowadays, you may be in 7, 8, or 9. And actually, I know somebody who worked for the government who didn't get off of 5 until last year. And you say, RHEL's been end of service life for 5 since like 2018. Yes, but they were still doing extended support for people that would pay them. But the thing about paying them in the extended support model, says it right in Red Hat. It says right on their documentation. We can go look it up if we want. It says right there that they can stop the support anytime, and that is an untenable security position for most companies. Meaning we have to get off it before there. Like government stuff, it's not staying on extended support like that. And most systems you're just simply not going to do it. It's too much power in somebody else's hands for your system stability and requirements, right? So, okay, we're not talking about that right now. But another thing that I always do is this. I always type last and pipe it through more. Why? I want to see the last people that have logged on the system. Last records. It reads out of a thing called WTemp, and you can man last to see the last logged in users. Right, and it'll tell you it reads out of var log WTemp, which is not a readable format. You have to use a tool to read that format. That file's pretty sure if we just cat it. What is it, var? I'm pretty sure that's not, yeah, see, that looks like a big old hot mess. So we can then read it with like last more, and that's a little more readable, right? So we take this, for me. And then I know who logged on the system. I know if somebody was on the system in the middle of the night when it happened to reboot. And this is the thing I tell you guys sometimes as a scenario that comes up sometimes where, devs would be like, no, none of us were doing anything on that box. And I'm like, that's real sus, guys, because there was like 7 of you logged into a prod server on a Saturday night when we only have business hours, normal stuff. And they're like, oh, no, sorry. We were doing a change. We forgot we were doing a change. And you're like, oh, you were doing a change. And you didn't tell Windows. Or, you didn't tell Windows or the Linux team or whatever team it is. And you didn't tell us about it. Okay. Now we've got something going on. Now we got something to talk about, right? Anyway, so then we find out that we got to roll back the whole thing and run through the whole pipeline again because they were mucking around with something. Because, again, maybe this needs to be said, you don't mess around in prod. You definitely don't mess around in prod off hours. You only do it in change windows when you've got approved changes, right? But that's not the purpose of this talk. We're just talking about simple things. Another one that I love is, I'll do uptime. I'll do last, pipe it through more. I'll do uname -r to see the version. I'll do my cat etc splat release to see, just make sure that it's the box that I think it is and the server type that I think it is. Because again, maybe somebody released Ubuntu into my RHEL environment. I got an all Red Hat environment, but somebody put a new version of something on there. These things happen. And I say, well, wait a minute, no. What if I come over here and I say, the other one that I think that you should know how to do is this. Catproc command line will show you the system calls. So the calls that were made against the system as it booted. This one right here is tremendously useful if you're in an environment. Like I used to work with a lot of big IBM equipment, and we would boot the LPARs into different partitions and different disks. And sometimes, this is also true, I work on a system, we have a thing called a Hydra, where we sometimes boot into ESXi, and sometimes we boot into our Werewolf cluster. It just depends on the individual nodes, depending on what we need the cluster for at the time. So we've got this tool cluster that we can switch in between the versions. Well, one of the things that I can do, well, by the way, it's very easy to tell if you're on ESXi or a normal Linux box, because ESXi tends to be much more locked down by default. But let's back up a second. Catproc command line, if I did that across a list of servers, if I did that against a bunch of servers, I would be able to tell if they had booted the same way. In fact, let me show you guys in my home lab. If I did that right here, these are 4 servers. These are 2 sets of different servers, the Rocky boxes and the Hammer boxes. And I'm going to run a catproc command line against them. And we're going to see, do they look similar? There's a lot of info that's about to pop on the screen. But, I don't need the Sleep 300. That was we were doing a demo last night. So watch this real quick. If I look at that, now granted, ETH0 is different based on the MAC addresses of the Werewolf nodes because they're stateless nodes as they come up. Sure. But if I looked at all that and I didn't know anything else, I could at least probably say that I have a similar type of deployment. They were all Werewolf deployed. I can tell that right there. I could that's the WW init, by the way. But maybe I come over here and I do another quick one, and I just want to make sure they're all the same server, the same type of server. Maybe I don't know anything else about them, but could I look at that real quick? Again, don't worry about the commands we're running. Just look at the output. Can I reasonably say that those are all the same type of server? I mean, I didn't know maybe that they were Werewolf under the hood, but let's say we do. Yeah, those are all the same server, right? Those are all doing the same thing. So let me get my little Werewolf. By the way, Prolug Lab is back up. So if anybody's used to using the Prolug Lab, check out in the Discord how to access that. That's available for people again. I have both the Linux sysadmin course back up and the security engineering course. So both sides of the courses are up. I am going to continue cleaning those up. Don't worry about that too much, but that's slowly coming up. Yeah, Discord should show you guys a little Discord link. There you go. Thanks for that, Enzo. But yeah, we keep coming down here, and then man uname to see what options. Maybe you go look at the man for uname, and here's all those different options that I was kind of showing. And really, at the end of the day, you might say, well, Scott, Which one of those do I need to do? And I go, well, I'll show you the ones that I normally use. Uname-A, Uname-R, Uname-M sometimes. Uname-A is kind of a novelty. I would never because you can't programmatically use that, right? Like, that doesn't programmatically work. You'd have to carve stuff up. It's easier to just get it with the smaller commands. But my point in bringing all that up is we're just looking at the system. We're not changing anything. We're doing observations, right? From that perspective, we're doing observation of the system. But yeah, look at all this. We just barely did this top part, gathering system information. And this is the type of thing that I would walk people through and see what kind of, see how the gears are turning in their heads, see how they like to look at this. Because again, I tell you guys this all the time, and this is 100% true. 17 years of college experience, college teaching right here. And if I tell you this and it resonates, you just got a lot of free education here. One of the worst things I think that could happen to you. Hey, Twisted Seed, how's it going? Thanks for the Prime. I appreciate that.
Hi.
Hi back. But what about this? Hold on a second real quick. What if you were all the way in like your third or fourth year of college? You're paying all this money. You're maybe doing it yourself and you're getting student loans, right? And then you find out that the job is all this. It's all this just command line stuff. And you just look at that and you go, what a fucking mess. I hate this. I hate it. I hate every single second that this guy's been talking. I mean, people probably left by this point if they hated it, but you just hate it. Wouldn't it be better to find that out for free here while you're just like messing around on a Twitch stream or a YouTube stream? I think that would be extremely valuable. There's that old C.S. Lewis quote, if two guys are on the wrong path, the one that's most progressive is the one that's turned back first, right? Back to get on the right path, right? And all the implications of that aside, I mean, gosh, could you just imagine just hating this and having spent like 4 years of college at it? Side note, one of my brother-in-laws, he got his degree in chemical engineering. Got his bachelor's degree in chemical engineering. I'm like, man, that's awesome. When are you going to work in this field? When are you going to do some chemical engineering? And he looked at me and he goes, Scott, I hope to never, ever do chemical engineering again. And I was like, gosh. I mean, that's rough, right? But also, like, can't you see that, like, man, I could have just smacked you in the back of the head and told you don't like chemistry. Wouldn't that have been better than the 4 years of sitting in school and doing all that stuff to find out that at the end that they were just going to smack you in the back of the head and tell you didn't like the shit? Oh, and also tens of thousands, if not nowadays 100,000. He was in state and he probably had a scholarship, so probably still tens of thousands of dollars, right, of cost. So anyways, my point in saying all that is, get on to here. This was the whole point of this weekend down in our Discord. We had all these sessions and stuff, and the whole thing was find something that's interesting to you. We had data analytics guys, we had security guys, we had systems engineers and software engineers, and just all kinds of brilliant people. I've got this skill of like collecting smarter people than me, and they were all down there talking to you guys about these systems and the things that you should do. So anyways, back to the Linux. I'm up on my soapbox a little bit, but you guys can do this stuff, but figure out what you want to do in this space, right? Linux is very good as a base for all kinds of other cool things. You do not have to just be a Linux engineer down in the basement working on servers like I do, right? Twisted Seed, you were there for the security one? Nice. Were you there for the one that Burninator did? Burninator came in and talked. I've known him for a while. Yeah, he gives good talks. Yeah, Burninator, he's great. He's run offensive missions for the government. Like, that's what he's done. So he's done attacks that other people can't do legally, right? Which I think is an awesome bit of knowledge for you guys to come in and hear about. And then mostly he did protective stuff, but it was interesting that he was talking about the missions that he was on and those kind of things. So let's talk a little bit about memory then. So what about this server? You know what? As I'm kind of framing in my head what's going on with this server that I've never been on before. I've never been on this particular Ubuntu box before. I've been in their labs before, but I don't really know what's going on under the hood. And at some level, if you just think about this for a second, all I really have is this terminal shell. I have standard input, standard output, and standard error. Those are the three things I have. I can give commands with standard input. I can get output, standard out, as we call it, or I can get standard error. Those are the things I can do. So this is in some ways, I like if you close your eyes for a second and think about it. I remember this quote from C.S. Lewis long ago where he said, well, all his quotes are long ago, he's dead, right? But he said famously, radio is theater of the mind. And that always stuck with me around like systems engineering because of this. This right here is it's not, I'm not in a windowed environment in the terminal here. I mean, I'm in a windowed environment out here, obviously. OBS is a windowed environment, right? To stream, you have to be in a windowed environment. But what I mean is this environment exists as an abyss. It's like I'm throwing like a fishing line into the abyss. There's nothing like, so as I'm starting to like frame my head around what's going on with the system, we now know things. We know the architecture of the underlying, the kernel. We know the version of the system, but we don't know the RAM or the disk or the IO or the speed. We know nothing of that. It's literally in the term of like we use in the industry of a black box. I'm looking at a black box right here. I have no idea what's going on in there. So let's figure that out a little bit, right? Because that's what we're here for. So if I do cat proc mem info, this is going to dump all the memory information to the screen, and it's pretty useless. I mean, unless you just love converting kilobytes per second or kilobytes of memory down to megs, that's a little bit much right there. That's a little bit much to look at. Now, is it raw? Is it the perfect representation of the accurate memory that the kernel sees? Absolutely, yes. But to our little human brains, is that great? No. So we have a tool, free, which will give us some good information. Free is good. But free could be done better. I'm going to move this over here so it's out of the way. Free could maybe, I mean, that's still kind of annoying and not great to look at. And by the way, I don't actually even know if these are in bytes or kilobytes or what, unless I read the man page on. I happen to know it's kilobytes because we just saw that. But what if I want to modify the way that works? So I'll give it an option. You have a bunch of things that you can do in the command line world, right? Like you give a command, free is the command. Then you can give any number of options, and then you give what's called the argument. This command does not require an argument. This command requires just the command and then options. And we're going to give it free-m. And we can also give it free-g just for fun, but you'll find very quickly that free-g is too big of a container to be useful. But if we go back to free-m, we can understand that it's nearly 2 gigs of memory, right? Because it's in megs. So every 1,000 megs is going to be approximately 1 gig. It's different if we're talking about gigabytes and gigabytes. It got close enough. It's going to be a little different, right? But we're not going to split hairs on that here. And that's about 2 gigs of memory. But down here, when we carved it up, it didn't cross the threshold, so it only saw 1 gig of memory. And if we used all the memory, we would see 0 here, even if in a more granular sense, there may have been more free memory. So there's some things to think about there. But my point in saying all that is I can see the commands, I can see the memory of the system, and I can see it in a somewhat useful way, right? I can maybe go here, maybe if we wanted to go a little more advanced, and I could maybe say something like while true. Maybe I write a little loop here, right? And Chris Higgy, thanks for the follow. Hopefully this stuff's useful to you. Looks like Twitch is like blowing up or something, but hopefully this stuff's useful. I'm going to say do free-m because that's the command I want. And really just take this away for a second. In between the do and the done, I can do any number of things I want. So I'm going to say free-m and then sleep 5. And if I type these commands in this order, don't worry about what we're doing. We're not getting into loops or anything yet, although we're going to do a loop. And then while we sit here and talk, we could figure out what that command just did. Even if I didn't tell you, I think if we just sat here for a while, we'd be able to be like, okay, it's getting up to the top of the while loop and it's finding true. It's evaluating for truth and it's finding true. So it's finding a 1. It's dropping into a block of code between the words do and done. It's doing a free-m that we just learned a second ago. And then it's sleeping for 5 seconds. comes to the end of done, goes back up to while true. True evaluates to true. True is never going to evaluate to untrue. So what I just did is a very bad computer sciencey thing. I just created an infinite loop. This system will keep looping until we fall into the sun, or the server turns off, or the entropy of time renders all things to be the same the same heat signature, right? Whatever it is, this thing will continue doing it until then, or until I hit Control C, right? Which, by the way, was at the top of this little talk. We talked about Control C. But the reason I showed you that is because maybe we could watch the memory here, and then inside of this terminal we can jump over to a new tab, and maybe we do like an apt-y install stress. Stress is a tool that'll allow us to stress the system a little bit. So we stress the system a little bit. Well, we're going to do that here in a second. Come back over here. We see that the used memory is still sitting around where it was. We still have the same amount free, maybe a little less free, but it's going to go back up when that other side gets done. Yep, so that's all done. And then now maybe I type the command stress in, and it tells me a little bit about itself. And it says, hey, you can stress this system out a little, and I will help you do it. So I can type in the word stress, and I can say VM is going to be 2. What is a VM? Well, VM right here is the same as memory, and it's going to spawn workers spinning on, don't worry about the malloc part of it right now, but it's going to spin that up, and the default size of each of them is going to be 256 megabytes. Go back over here for a second. Could I spin up 2 of them right now? If they're 256, 256, 256 would be close to 512 or something like that. Yeah, 512. So that's just under that. So I should be able to spin up 2 of them. Let's try that real quick. Let's say that, and then we'll give a timeout, right? -T for 20 seconds. Let's just do 20 seconds, which will be approximately 4 iterations of our loop over there. It would help if I spelled stress right. And now while that dispatches those hogs and we come back over here, we're about to see on this next iteration that we have a lot less free memory. We have started to use some of that memory up on this box. And you might say, well, you said it was going to be 512. It could be around 512. Okay. But the system handled that just fine. Watch, it's about to go back to normal. Because it's, yep, there it is, back to normal. That thing's done. But what if I tried to do the same thing, but I tried to use more memory? Like I allocate at 4, which will be a gig, but we don't have a gig free right now. Watch this. It's going to break. It didn't break? Oh, it didn't break because it has swap. Maybe. Kind of interested that that didn't break. They may have to change stress up a little bit. Yeah, it's interesting. So now we got more free. So it looks, I think Killer might have been killing some things because now we've got more free memory, right? So we could go back. Let me prove my point now. I went too small to prove my point because the system freed up memory. Let's go to like 8. It can't handle 8. It can't even pretend to handle 8. Yeah, see, that breaks. It got reaped. So that the process was killed, right? Come back over here. I just hit tab, so we have another tab up at the top. But looking at the system here, we could see how much memory is used. We can track the memory. We can kind of watch it over here. Maybe we start up a Java application. We got some dev team, and they want to run some application on our server, and it's not starting, and they're getting some weird memory error that they didn't get the day before. So maybe we go and we help them out by looking at this. How do we measure how much each process is taking of the total memory? Well, Enzo Bear, there's a couple of quick ways to see that. Top is one of them that people like. Within Top, you can do M, and it'll do it by meg, and you'll see the percentage of memory that's being used by something. So watch, I'm going to leave this running right here, and we're going to go back to that stress. And we're going to take, oops, I messed up. Hit the wrong button. Hold on. I went too low, guys. Let me pull this back up. Okay, I went too low on my screen. Let's go here and let's go back to the 2, and then over here you're going to see stress spin up, and stress is going to be running 2 that are using approximately this much of the memory that's been allocated to this system. 7.1, 11.9, and then it's going to be done. It's going to complete. It's going to go away. There's also other tools. There's tools that I prefer for this, but it's a good question because here's the thing. Do you want something quick like this to see now, or do you want something that you're going to report up later in like an engineering call? I can't take this right here. This tool, this is one of the reasons, like, you'll hear engineers and they'll be like, I don't use top ever. Well, the reason they don't use top tends to not be because they're trying to smell their own farts and be this, fucking whatever, I'm the smartest engineer in the room type thing. What it tends to be is this isn't useful for me to report out of. But watch this. Let me show you this other tool. I like this other tool for this. I just say, let's say VMstat 110. VMstat will show me, and this one's there's a little bit to interpret with VMstat, right? And I can show you how to interpret it here in a second. I don't use top because I use HTOP. Yeah. And I only use, ATOP or whatever. There's all kinds of tops for all kinds of reasons. But let's go to our VMstat. And we'll just watch VMstat 1. Every 1 second, this is going to do this. And then let's go over here to this other screen. And let's blow up 20 seconds of this. And now for 20 seconds of your application doing the thing it does, I can see if there's runnable or blockable processes, meaning are things running on the processor or waiting. Everything's running. Nothing's being blocked and nothing's waiting to get to the processor. You are chewing up a good amount of memory. Here we dropped from 14 to 10, and then now it's actually probably done. Hold on, right here. And also, by the way, when it gets to the bottom, it's done. We see that's done over here after 20 seconds. So then we can go here and we can kind of look at what was going on in the system, right? What was actually happening. We can start to evaluate these numbers, and then I could take this and turn this into a chart or a pivot or whatever I wanted to do. All that data analytics stuff that my brother Tommy was showing. I have useful data now that I can give to somebody and they could do something with. What's JTOP? Oh, what about BTOP? We had BTOP. Yeah, Q. I always have to include ATOP separate in my RHEL builds. I imagine it's the same way with HTOP. I only ever used ATOP because I don't think ATOP's even on here. No, but ATOP was a cool tool for this one reason. Let me see if I can find it. I'll show you guys what. Guys, your monitoring tools and the things you're going to do as engineers in your time are going to vary, as varied as the, lilies of the field, if you will. They're just going to vary over time. But you're going to have specific use cases for certain ones. When we watch systems, we like doing stuff like this. ATOP, I like ATOP because it shows me all those things, but it also shows me if anything's turning red. So Killer is killing stuff. Killer killed the thing earlier when it was all the way up on stress. But I like to report this out like every 10 minutes as well. I like this more than SAR if I'm going to go look through data later. And what happens is if you have all the ATOP results stored, you can actually jump through them. I think it's like Control-T to go through them and like Control-Shift-T to go back through them. And you can kind of watch the story of a server getting killed by all kinds of shit that happens to servers. But somebody might ask, like, hey, I noticed every time that this one process crashes on this one box, there's always this Falcon sensor running. Could you go check to see if Falcon sensor was running on all 10 of those machines when it crashed? Yeah, ATOP does that for me if I want. And it does it forensically too, in that it'll keep that information if you set it to run in the background. So it's kind of useful. JTOP is for an NVIDIA Jetson. Nice. I don't think I've ever used any of that. All right, so so could we, in this system, could we look at the amount of memory? Yes. And could we tell that memory was being used and allocated, and where it was being used and where it was being allocated on the system? Yeah, I think we could do that. I think we could. By the way, some of you guys might notice I said that I do this in like an hour with people in the lunchtime learning. We're taking our time. We're talking about stuff. I'm going off on different tangents and stuff, which is fine, right? There's no real time limit on how long I'm allowed to stream for or anything. The wife went to Bunko tonight, so I could kind of do whatever I want. Yeah, Falcon Sensor does some interesting things, and if it's allowed to update itself, I remember I got in like I wouldn't call it like a drag down, a drag out type fight or anything, but I got in a pretty good one with some of the military guys who were telling us, hey, we've got to turn on these nodes that you guys have exposed into our network for security posture. You need to enable. It was Tenable, which is Nessus, right? The Tenable Nessus scanner, and then also CrowdStrike has to be on these. And we said that's fine. And they go, but how are we going to keep updating them on your stateless nodes? They need to be able to update in real time. Now you might say, Scott, why did you get into an argument about this? It was the week after they did the billion-plus machine global outage. Does anybody here remember that? Most of us on the Linux side don't remember it because the only reason I remember it is all my Windows buddies were telling me about it. I have buddies that work in VoIP and networking and all these other things, and it was all hands on deck rebooting these Windows machines to get them to boot back up after Falcon Sensor took them all down. Do you guys remember that? Or whatever CrowdStrike uses on Windows. I don't know. But the point is, then we were having this discussion on the Linux side, and they're like, they need to be able to update their stuff in real time. And I'm like, no, they fucking don't. They can update like their dictionaries and stuff, but they can't update our systems in real time. That's insane. Was it about this time last year? That sounds about right. I remember all my friends over in tech in different areas were like super stressed, and I made some memes about it. Like us on the Linux side, we were just like sleeping. It was us sleeping in bed while everybody else was like running around, and it was like how I sleep knowing I run Linux, So that was kind of funny. Yeah, they turned around. People, this industry, the tech industry in general never learns, guys. If there's one thing that I could tell you that's like not controversial in any way, because literally every engineer you've ever met is like, yeah, that's true. It never learns. It's the same lessons over and over again. If you're an engineer that documents your shit and just fixes stuff, people are always going to think that you're like casting spells and doing magic because they're like, how did this person know this was going to happen? And you're like, because it happened 3 years ago. And what if I told you guys, what if I told you even before Falcon Sensor happened, there was a thing called SolarWinds? I bet all of you still run SolarWinds. Does anybody here remember SolarWinds got popped and just decimated a whole bunch of systems? People just fixed SolarWinds and kept running it in their systems with like full control. And I'm like, I was like, what the hell? I don't know how SolarWinds still exists. I loved SolarWinds too, by the way. I think it's like, I was going to put it down like Lassie. Like, and they didn't use a pistol on Lassie. But I'm saying I was going to like put it down like... Anyways, that's neither here nor there. You never document anything like that. I thought it was fine as an IPAM. That's what I had always used it for, was like our IP address management. So, but some people use like Blue Cat, or there's a bunch of different tools. I've seen it as Seam as well. Yeah, people will suck logs through it or whatever, but it has too much control in a lot of environments. And when it got popped, it went hard. People were pivoting all over and pulling all the data out of everywhere, and it was really bad. Really bad on the government side because there were so many systems that were embedded with it. It was... All right, anyways, so can we look at the RAM? Sure. Can we look? This is such an old talk, guys, that I still have my cat proc CPU info in there. Can I tell by looking at this how many processors there are? Yes. I also can use nproc, number of processors. There's one processor in this box. He's a tiny boy. And does it say it right? BOI. Anyways, genuine intel. I can start to see a bunch of information about this system and where things are happening and all that kind of stuff. One of the most insane defaults for some STIGs, you have to turn it on. Time of day restriction by default enforced at lunch break. That's actually really funny. If you ever do any government contracting in the U.S., anybody that does government contracting in the U.S., and you end up working, I can't quote all the states, guys. I'm not that smart, but I know for sure California is one of them. They have these labor laws there that like, and I would see this at Lockheed Martin when I worked there, where there was always these areas to put in on because it was like a normal, like our login system and our time tracker. you would have to in California put in you had to have your lunch break and then like 2 15-minute breaks somewhere in the day. You had to track them. You had to put them in when you took them. You had to do it because they had to be able to report up that they were giving people these additional breaks or whatever. Enzo Bear said, will my system blow up if I delete all my temp files? Sorry, temp directory in defense and Cali so stupid. Yeah, Q, I haven't had to do time. Well, I do general timesheets now. I don't do every 6 minutes like Lockheed Martin had us do. We had to keep track it down to every 6 minutes, or 1/10 of an hour, which is 6 minutes. Enzo Barry said, will your system blow up if you delete? If you delete the /temp directory off your system, you will have some problems, especially with system. There's so many things that assume /temp is there. So if you delete the directory, you will have problems. If you delete all the files out of the directory, you're not, like, your system's going to continue to work. Sure. In fact, if you delete the /temp directory, your system will still work. There's just a bunch of things that assume that a /temp is there. A thing that you don't know unless you dig in or use RHEL for a while is RHEL has a cleanup tool in the background running. I think it's actually running out of log rotate if you go look. That cleans anything that hasn't been modified for over 30 days out of temp. That's turned on by default in RHEL. So you have to go turn that off if you don't want it. I'm Veer Singh said, sorry, off topic. Do we have this doc in the Discord? We do, but just for fun. Just for fun, because I probably haven't updated this in a while. Let me make sure it's still updated. Hold on. Yeah. This is up there, but I will put it up again. Give me 1 second. We are on the processor stuff, right? NProc. Give me 1 second here. Also, real quick, as a thing to show you guys real quick in Discord, we have a lot of stuff going on in Discord. The Prolog Lab environment, I fixed that up, so that's back working. Let me grab this doc real quick, which I think is over here. Let me give me 1 second here. Let me go find it, because I know I have it open right now. I think I have it just in Linux group. And then where do I have this one? Is it just called Prolog? Let me go find where it is. I don't know exactly where I got this saved. Hold on. Save as will tell me it is in Linux group Prolog. Oh, this is in the Linux system admin course? That seems weird. That seems like a weird place for it. Oh, I might have made you guys do this at the beginning. Maybe that's why. Yeah. Where do we want to put this? This should be in. This should probably be in. Let's call it resources. Let's just put it under presentations. That's fine, huh? Yeah. Evaluation. There you go. Boom. It'll be docx. I guess. Do you want it as a PDF? Do you want it on? Hold on. I can do it as a PDF too. Hold on. File. Save as. Switch it over to PDF. Boom. I think there was actually an option now to save it as a PDF. But let me just grab this. Linux evaluations. Give me 1 second here. There you go. Alright, so you can have it as either, I guess. Boom. Yeah, so now it's up in the Discord. It's already up there somewhere, but I'm sure that's fine. Alright, let me get rid of that. It's too bright. So, this environment's going to die in 5 minutes, by the way, which means that I'm almost ready for a break. But, you know, what can I see with CPU info? I can find a lot of information about this system. I can find flags. Maybe I need to know this. What I'm showing you guys here is much, much more common if you're doing physical servers. If you're doing virtual machines, you're getting whatever's passed through by the VM. But if I'm working on like big, beefy servers that are doing some kind of big processing, I care about things that are going on with the processor for different reasons, for different flags, different things that I'm going to set when I maybe compile some Lustre software or something. A big one is like Weka. Weka is this very fast, high-speed network, high-speed networking file system that we use often nowadays. It's actually very common in government systems now to use this tool called Weka. And Weka demands a certain number of processors. It wants 4. I don't know if you can give it more. You could probably tune it, but as you configure it, you can set it to do those things as you build it or whatever. It's how a lot of software is. You can configure what's going on in the system, but sometimes you need to go look that up. We've got one processor in this machine. We can see that here. Yeah, so there's that. Hey, thanks for the follows. For people, if I missed anybody, Camrix and Osurto, hopefully this stuff's useful to you. We're done with processors, so we've looked at the processors. I'm going to refresh this page and let this lab restart because we were at an hour, so it's going to reset itself anyways. If anybody wants to do this lab with me, I'm not actually doing the lab. We're just doing a system. We're just doing an evaluation of ourselves. So for a quick review over here, this is up in the Discord. It's called the Prolog Linux Evaluations, and it just says the things that you kind of need. You need to hop in a Killer Coda lab. They're free. Google, do whatever you want to find the right answer. But then we did some system gathering of information. We looked at the RAM and the number of processors. Now we're going to go look at the storage and information about mounted file systems. That's going to be the next thing that we're going to do. Labs. I'm just going to call you Labs. Let me tell you that that we have actually the capability of sending stuff into our lab environment from here in chat, and people were just constantly throwing like rm-rf up there, so we had to like stop that kind of stuff. But no, I mean, what'll happen for anybody that cares is your system will glob everything it can and start deleting it, and eventually you're going to get to bin rm and it's going to delete itself, and then the next time it goes to glob, it's not going to be able to execute. So you will ruin a box, but you will not ruin a box to a way where like people can't get the data back. Just so you guys know, like some people think like, oh, you type the rm-rf and then run away as like they kick in your door. It'll only stop your system from working, but forensics teams will still get all the data off it. So I know that's not what you were asking, but that's, I'm just letting you guys know, like you don't get as much as you would hope with that as far as like catastrophically wiping data. In fact, no data is actually wiped. The data is still all on the disk. But let's look a little bit at a box. We'll do this part and then we'll take a little break and people can hang out and talk shop. Oh, real quick, actually, before we do that, I want to show you guys one other thing. We had this huge talk this weekend. We had like all kinds of events and all kinds of stuff going on. But the Bash study group starts up again next Saturday. So Colchis runs that. Very popular group. Lots of people show up. I'd say on average they have like 10 to maybe 30 people in there. So that's pretty good. And then on the 30th, we've got a professional pen tester coming in to talk about his industry. So a little background on him. I won't tell you guys his name. I always let people tell you as much as they want about themselves. But I can tell you on LinkedIn, his company is constantly looking for more pen testers. And I've known him for 17 years now. He actually, funny enough, was one of my first college students 17 years ago. He was in the first cohort of college students that I had. But he's a professional pen tester now. He's got an OSCP, a G-Pen, and a CISSP, which I share. But OSCP and G-Pen I do not have. I'm not I don't do that type of offensive security. But he's going to come in and talk to you guys about how he got in the industry, what he does, what his company looks for, all that kind of stuff. So that's at the end of the month. Those are free talks. Every one of the talks in our Discord is always free. You guys can just come to them. Because, not everybody wants to do Linux like this. Some people just want to do Linux for fun. That's fine. And go and do security or storage or networking or whatever. There's all kinds of other things that you can do that are like Linux adjacent. So anyways, I want to bring that up, and let's get into mounted file systems. So if I asked you here, this is actually an interesting question that I sometimes ask, because I always get one answer, but it's not really the right answer. But how would you tell all the file systems that are mounted on this Linux box right here? We've got a Linux box, and this is for you guys to think about. That's great. How would you see all the mounted file systems on here? What would you do? Well, the correct command is actually mount, right? Mount will show you all the stuff that's going on the system, but That might be maybe a little more information than we need. And usable file systems and things that we can actually use and put data into, we might use dog food. We may use something else. We may use something like df-h. And df-h, this is kind of what people think I'm asking with that question, which is not bad. And lsblk is good as well, Chingapot, but not necessarily for this. But let's just say we wanted to know, like, what's usable by me. Maybe the correct answer to that would be df-h. But all the mounted things, all the storage that your system has available, whether it be actual disk block devices or networks or things that are sometimes hidden by df-h, like what we would call RAM disks and other things like that, all of that is shown with the command mount. And all of those things are stored in the mtab. So if you cat etc mtab, you're not to modify this by hand ever. If you cat your etc mtab file, you will see all of those, but not in as readable a format. Mounts is considered the more readable format. And then typically the answer I actually wanted, or not the answer I wanted, but the most correct answer to like usable file systems that are mounted is df-h. That's the one that most people want. I'm Veer Singh said, just curious, is it possible to take requests to change the bash study group timing? Time zone issues work for majority. That's all good. I'm Veer Singh. The person who runs that is Kolkus, and that's a time that works for him. But I will tell you this: if you were like, hey, Saturday night for us, like maybe you say like, hey, in Scott's time zone, 10 p.m. is maybe like 8 a.m. for you. Because I know people are all over the planet Earth here, right? I would probably be okay with setting something like that up, and especially if I could find somebody to run it. Like, because I don't want to be. I tell you guys all the time, this is not supposed to be the Scott show. The Prolog Discord is for anybody to do things. But I'm very saying I could see us doing maybe. Find somebody that's willing to run it that late to us, but more early to you guys. And actually, you know what? It's funny. We got a guy who's on the other side of planet Earth now. We got a guy that's over in Japan who I might see if he's willing to do something a little later, because I think more people would do it. Or Control Byte. If Control Byte did it, I think that would be awesome. Like, especially if because I know Kolkus, I don't want to speak for him, but I know I've seen some of his stuff. He has like a whole curriculum that he's put together. So if we could get people to even sync that up a little bit, I think that would be awesome, right? Because we have so much stuff out of our. If some of you guys haven't been around for this stuff, we have course books out there. These are free books, right? Course books that we've put together. Linux admin course, our Linux security course. If Kolkus wanted to put one of those together for like the bash study group, and then all the study groups were aligned, look, man, I'm all for using freaking Discord's bandwidth up. Those guys, man, we had a massive problem with them this weekend, guys. By the way, but anyways, yeah, greetings from France. It's actually funny. My last name is French. I'm not really French, so I'm more Irish, I think. But my last name is very French. It's Champagne. Which is that gonna spell it right? Not right. Yeah, those presentation live streams were bad, huh, Sending? All right, so I don't want to get too far off of what I'm doing here, but guys, Discord has all kinds of stuff, all kinds of persistence, all kinds of places for you guys to hang out and talk with other people. Yeah, I'm Veer Singh. Let's plan that. I'm having my guys tell my guys. Also, most of our Prolog engineers can actually make events. So maybe I'll put something late on the books, and then I'll run it until we can find somebody to run it later. Or if I'm running it and Control Byte shows up, I'll just disappear and he'll have to run. So, yeah. So we have things that are persistent and online. Guys, these are free, right? You can literally, I tell you guys all the time, you could print them out and run away like a cartoon villain, and I couldn't stop you, nor would I have any inclination to stop you, right? Like, use this stuff, find something that's good out of it or whatever. But checking our storage, right? So for people that got here later and kind of like Sending Grounds, I know he probably just showed up. We're kind of doing an evaluation for people to see how I used to sit down with our like network teams and network operations and like kind of more junior teams, for people that said they want to come over to the Linux team, I would sit down with them on like the lunches, and we would go through like gathering information and checking RAM and just stuff about systems, and we would just talk about it, right? Some of the things I would tell them is you can Google this. This was written before ChatGPT, guys. Like ChatGPT wasn't a thing when I wrote this in like 2017, maybe. I tell them to read the man pages, hit Q, Control C, like all the basic things that I think you need, right? But we got down here. We were about to take a break, but we got down to storage. And one thing that I sometimes show you guys is DF by itself. Man, I've been doing Linux a long time. That is one of the most useless commands I've ever seen in my life. Just in that, it doesn't really help you any. Like DF without the -H, I just don't like it. -H is human readable, by the way. And you can man DF to find more information out about it, right? H is human readable, block size. There's this thing called inodes. What the heck's an inode, right? DF-I. That's the other side of the equation that people don't talk about very much, because it's very rare, guys, for... Oh, you know, it's actually fun. I've been typing things on both sides. I just realized I could just drop them over here in my... I have a little Discord bot. Or not Discord bot, a stream bot. And that would send it to both of you guys. I don't know why I'm typing twice, but... anyways, storage. So back up a second and think about like how storage works, right? Like I have the desire from a system of some type, whatever it's doing over here, turning, you know, Rubik's cubes or something. It has a desire to put information somewhere. It doesn't want to use it right now, so it needs to go put it away. And in this case, it's using a block device, but it could be calling RAM location. It could be doing any kind of things. And what's required to store something? Like if you just think about this, actually, there's really good talk yesterday that we did record, by the way, and he may put it up on YouTube. And King Buns was talking about like the contracts of how we look at stored data. I'm just talking about we've got a block of data in some way in some agreed upon contract, and we want to go put it somewhere, right? What do I need to have to put it somewhere? Well, I need to have a place to put it. And then, speaking of places, I have to have an address to be able to put it there and an address to find it later. And if the address changes or isn't correct, I'm never going to see my data again. It's going to be lost to the ether. And if it's not immutable, meaning some other thing, either the passage of time or some other process can change it, when I get back to the right address, it's going to be the wrong data anyway. So that's also a problem. But where I'm going with that is this. What we think of as space in a file system is actually what I was just describing, that place that we put stuff. So space is like the bookshelves in a library. How much space do you have? How many places can we put books? But it's also, guys, it's just as much a problem if I don't have a way to address those books. If I have a tiny little card catalog, we used to have these things called card catalogs back in the day, but a tiny little card catalog, and I could only address 8 places back there. 8 places books can be. It doesn't matter if I have the old, what is it, the Babylonian library, whatever that library was that was burned up, the Great Library. Or is it the Alexander? I don't remember what library it was. You guys can go look it up on the game Civilization or whatever, right? Because if you got to that library first, you would advance faster than other people. Those contracts can't ever be canceled anytime. Yeah. So, but my point is, it doesn't matter how much Alexandria. That's exactly right. And it doesn't matter how big of a space you have if you don't have the locations of address to be able to go find it again. So in both ways, storage actually has. I would even say there's other facets of storage that are important too. But at our level, at the operating system, we really care about how much space do I have, and that's almost always what people think about, these percentages of used space. But then we also have how many addressable blocks we have of that space. This was a real library. Yeah, it was. Alexandria was. Then when we store, so we look at storage and it says DF is barely readable, DF-H. We can also use a DF-H and then look specifically for one thing. So maybe just boot. I just want that piece. Or I can do DF-H and maybe if I had a grep here, var, and in our case, we don't have var on its own partition, but if it was on its own partition, we would see it there. And then in my case, I don't see I don't see a var on its own partition, so that's not going to find anything. But here's an interesting thing. If I do a df-h against the var directory, which I do know exists, it will show me where the system is logically going to go and put that. Like what device is going to be called, what block device. Dev VDA1 is where my system is actually going to go write to maybe even a spinning disk. This is actually writing in RAM, but that doesn't matter here. It's neither here nor there. For the purpose of this talk, it's just an addressable space that I can write to. And then when I grab it and go to that space again, I get the right data back. Again, not the passage of time or entropy affects those bits or whatever, right? Because you might say, Scott, why do you keep saying that? Well, because if anything can change it, it doesn't matter if it was on purpose or on accident. If the data has went from like structured data and just moved down into like a blob like this, it's useless to us either way now, right? Whatever that data was. So then I maybe say something like we could df-h, and we got to change our discussion here a little bit. Maybe instead of SD, we look for VD because that's the types of disks we have. SD was back when we were using the SATA disks, right? So SD instead of HD, which were the old IDE disks, were HD for hard drive disks, right? And then SDs were the SATA disks that we moved to. Now you'll still see SD even if it's like SSD. There's no like different designator typically in Linux for that, but we can type mount again. So mount would show us a bunch of things. And maybe I only want mount if it's got that maybe grep-i for VD again, and then only if it's one of those block VD devices. Now, why might I do VD instead of like VDA? VDA looks like it's the same output here, but do you think that's always true? Do you think that's always true on all systems? I mean, some of you probably, as we think about disks, what do we know about a system? If I do a mount grep for VD and I only see VDA as the disk, I know that of all the mounted things I have on this file system, of all the mounted things that this system knows about, I only know of one disk. Now you might say, Scott, you only have one disk. That's not true. I only have one disk mounted right now. I may have more disks in the system, and that would be LSBLK. LSBLK and BLK-ID will tell me how many disks my system sees along the system bus. And you say, well, wait a minute. So df-h and mount only show you things that are usable and being actively used by the system, but other things could exist? Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In a system, if I haven't configured new disks, or if somebody slapped disks on the side of a VM that I have and I haven't done anything with them, they're absolutely not going to show up in df-h or any of the df commands or mount because they're not being used yet. Let me show you something real quick. In my home lab, right? Let's go look at, let's go hit all this. We'll go to one. Go to Rocky 1 real quick. df-h shows temp file. So look at all this. This is all tempfs and some NFS mounts, right? But look at this. Those disks, none of those disks are being used. Dev XVDA1, or A, XVDB, XVDC, XVDE, and then block ID. Are any of them carved up? Yeah, they're just sitting there. They're chilling. They're part. They think they're LVM2 members, like they think they're part of logical volume management, but the system doesn't think they are. Oh, I got to add PV. I got to add the logical volume management commands to these. I'm rebuilding the lab, guys, and I just got it limping along last weekend. But the lab is up for people that know how to get in the lab. You can get in there through the Discord. So, anyways, so my point in showing you all this is there's a bunch of stuff that you can do with disks, and everything I'm showing you here deals with the storage space and the storage inode locations and the disks and those kind of things. Then we come down here and we can see the usage of those. So maybe I look at where I'm at and I'm in root and I do a df-h on root and I see that I'm mounted, my slash root, which is home's, root's home, is mounted off of slash, which is the root of the file system. And I say du -sh dot, and I see that this file system that I'm in is using 72 kilobytes. Nothing. But if I CD back, CD to root of the whole thing, that's going to use a lot more, 4.9 gigs. In fact, that should pretty much be everything right here. 4.8, 4.9, it's about the same. I see that I've got 14 gigs available, approximately. Cool, 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 cool. Now, I could start to fill that up. I could fill this up in two ways, right? Let's just do this real quick. Let's say df dash, let's clear the screen. df dash h root, df dash I root, and then we start to think like, what could we do to this poor system? We could disk duplicator, in file is equal to dev 0, so we'll just grab a bunch of zeros. Out file is equal to big file, root big file, let's say. It's fine. Block size is going to be 1024K, and count is equal to 5 gigs. So 5,000 1K blocks is a meg. So it's 5,000 gigs. It's 5 gigs. And if I do that, it takes a second. And I do my df-h on root again, I see that we're now using 1 gig or 5 gigs more than we just were. Oh, about 5 gigs. And fun fact, I'm using one more inode than I was. I have one less inode, one more used. But that's not a super convenient way to see it. What if I did something like touch root files, and then in files I did, maybe I did 10,000. I'm just gonna make 10,000 files real quick. And then I do my df-I, and I would expect to have 10,000. That should be 126,843 now. Oh, whoops. You guys gotta stop me. Is it 2 of them? I don't know what's going on anymore. You guys gotta stop me. I think it's 2 of them. I haven't done this in enough time. Yeah, there it is. Used. Oh, it was more used. What the hell am I? I don't know. Who knows? Who even knows anymore, guys? I thought the first one would do it. The second one is more of I use a lot of Ansible, so I thought that one should have worked. Yeah. It did use more. Why did I think it was going to be 16? Oh, because I'm dumb. Guys, just ignore me. Just talk amongst yourselves. I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. All right, but the point is, my stuff kind of worked for most of it. So let's keep going. Let's get off of the disk stuff for a second. Just ignore me. Yeah, I don't know what was going on. I don't know what's been going on with my brain in general, but let's talk about the system and the uptime of the system. So if we do an uptime, I'll see that this box has been up 2 hours and 23 minutes. This server that I've connected to in some way. It is on the back end. It's what is it? KubeVirt? Whatever the virtualization tool is that they use for Killer Coda backend. LSUSB show all the devices connected to the device instead of LSBLK. LSUSB should only show you USB devices. Yeah, they use KubeVirt under the hood. That's what it is. LSUSB should only show you USB devices. LSPCI is pretty common for all the connected PCI stuff. And I use that, like, I've probably gotten the most out of that when I'm like going and doing some hardware thing. Like I'll add some, PCI slot or some kind of riser card to like 10 servers. I'll be in the data center actually doing it on physical boxes. And then I'll go back. I typically don't leave until I know it's good, right? So then I turn them all on and I run a command across all of them like Ansible or something. And I look for that one. Because by the way, when you're working on a hardware, it's always going to be down. And then when it comes back up, maybe I don't see it on one of the 9. And I'm like, shit, I didn't rock it in there right. Or maybe I got a bad PCI slot. Yeah. And then all kinds of GPU drivers. Yeah, things I'll tell you about this that will help you for guys that if you're working on physical hardware, again, the server is going to be down as you add these. These things are not hot swappable. Hot swappable things tend to be inside of their own RAID controllers. So RAID disks tend to be hot swappable nowadays. Some RAM in some types of servers are hot swappable. But I'm going to tell you, if you're ever doing that, the memory profile that can change, especially in big HPC where you need it to be exactly the same between like a +3 and -3% variance, taking one memory stick out would be catastrophic anyways. Therefore, we tend to just offline nodes, fix them, and bring them back up as a behavior. And if I've offlined things, I always have my bloody dmessage. So dmessage grep for like PCI, and this will show me as my system walked the system bus. So the dmessage, the kernel gets handed off to, and then the kernel does its own walk of the system bus. Meaning the kernel kind of like sits down at the desk and goes, okay, here's my little drink, and here's my phone, and here's my little notebook. Oh, I just spilled my drink. And then you're like, Scott, do you really have to touch all your shit every time you sit down at your desk? And I say, yes, I do. I have to, here's my little thing for my wrists, and here's my keyboard, and here's my, got to move this a little bit. If I did all that, I would be the kernel, because that's what the kernel does. But one of the nice things about that is you can see if there's errors. And you might say, Scott, that's a lot of info. I don't know what that's saying. I don't know what it's saying either. But if I just did something to 10 servers and one of them's behaving incorrectly, at that point, I'm just playing Sesame Street, right? One of these things is not like the others. One of these things just isn't the same. I can find out what server's busted pretty quick. And guys, I can't even see the colors right. I'm colorblind, so I can't see when something's blinking amber or whatever. I have to look at the system. But I can tell if something's blinking because I turn on the blinking light or whatever. So anyways, all right. Yeah. But troubleshooting, dmessage, and then lsmod. And then looking for like PCI or something, and seeing, or if you expected NVIDIA to be there and you expected certain drivers to be there. It's just that it's like some of these things that are almost like second nature to just type in to check within a system, you know. But for us right now, we're working on uptime of a system. And why might I care that a system's been up for a certain amount of time? Well, maybe like in my home lab, he's been up only 2 hours because we rebooted him a little while ago. But maybe I want to see if all of these were rebooted around the same time that I made the last change. Maybe somebody's complaining to me about Hammer 5, and I find maybe they're all only been up 2 hours, but let's say I find Hammer 5 has been up 5 days. I'm dealing with stateless werewolf nodes, so if I just updated something today and then I rebooted all my servers, but for some reason Hammer 5 didn't take it, and I see that it's got more uptime than it should, maybe I got to go kick that over in the hypervisor. Maybe I got to go do some other thing outside of the Linux to get all of my systems to see the things the same way, right? So there's just all kinds of things you can learn with uptime. Let's man uptime. What does uptime show us? It tells us how long the system's been running. But then it also gives us this other thing, the system load averages for the past 1, 5, and 15 minutes. That's super useful to know. So if I say uptime, and I go, okay, that gives me that. And then I say nproc and uptime. The uptime here, the load average right here, is relative to the number of processors we have, right? And you can go read about this, and this is all, you know, Brendan, Greg type stuff if you want to go get into performance monitoring of systems and stuff. But suffice it to say, if I have one processor and this number goes above 1, there's weight for my processor. If this number is 24 and this number is 10, there's still no weight for my processors. Well, not natively, there's not weight. Somebody could write an application that only uses one processor, and then they're going to have weight. But in general, other processes are not waiting for that system. Okay, so let's test this real quick. Let's say watch. Watch is a terrible one for this. We'll say while true, do done, right? And what did I tell you guys earlier that does? It evaluates true to always be true. steps into a loop between do and done and executes a block of whatever we want. Whatever we want. I can put whatever I want here. I can say echo the same thing over and over again, and it'll just do that forever. But that's not really what you guys care about. I want to see uptime. And I want to see uptime. Oh, that's too fast, isn't it? Look at that. That's multiple times per second. That's like 40 or 50 times a second probably. So I don't want that either. So then we put some brakes on it right here. Maybe sleep 5 or something. And then now every 5 seconds this is going to run for us. And it's going to show us the load average. Then we're going to go pop and hit this little button here if you're doing Killer Coda with me. If we were on a different system, we could SSH in or do something else. But I'm going to say app-y install stress. And while it's installing stress, watch this. You're going to see a little bit of load jump up on the system. A little bit, not a lot. Be a little bit of load. Remember, this is the 1 minute, 5 minute, 15-minute timers. And they're sliding windows. 1 minute is very short, so it's very acute. 5 and 15 minutes are much longer, and they look more at chronic problems, right? But yeah, this system's not doing too much. But then we pop over here for stress, and we say stress, and it just tells us, hey, you want to stress a system out? Stress -C. Now we know we have 1 processor. Let's pretend that we have 4, and we'll give it a timeout of 180. So for 3 minutes, we're going to stress this as though it had 4 processors as hard as we can. And now we come over here, and we're going to watch these things shoot up, but we're going to watch the 1 minute go up faster. 1 minute's going to go up faster than the longer sliding windows, the kind of more trailing indicators of 5 and 15 minutes. So we can watch that. So over here I said read the man page for uptime and figure out what those 3 numbers represent. We know it's the load average weight against the processor. The number of processors matter. We have 1 processor, so anything higher than 1 is weight. So we hit that pretty quick. And then after a while, we're going to watch this. These ones are slowly going to go up. And then this one's going to very quickly drop off when it's done. And these ones are going to drop off at a much more gradual pace. Now, what I'm showing you here is useful for us as admins and engineers. But it's less useful if I want to show this to somebody else, or I want to give this to like my network operations team and I want them to watch this late at night. What's better for me with them is when we go to, like, we have these monitoring labs that show you how to build out Grafana. It's way easier and better to show people this stuff right here in Grafana, because then they can visually see it. They don't have to be in a command line. Guys, if you can keep your users off the command line, that's probably a good thing. We can do Linux. We like Linux, but other people don't necessarily like Linux like us. In fact, I'd say in my career, you know, I've probably seen about 10% of students that do Linux with me like it. And of that 10%, probably only another 10% of them actually are any good at it. And now that's not saying that you can't get good at it. I'm just saying, like, there's a coincidence of them not caring and not really wanting to do it, that just, like, people just don't get good at this. They just don't care. And that's fine. More Linux for me, right? More Linux for those of us in the Linux group, right? But I'm saying, people, you can have quite a rewarding career as well doing Linux and you know, and getting paid for it, I think. Or I know, because I do it. That's almost done, and we're going to watch this number start going down. We're going to see this start to move back down, and the 1 minute load average will be back to chilling, while the 5 minute is still experiencing that 3 minutes. That 3 minute window will be completely contained in the 5 minute window, and you will see that it will take a lot longer once this goes back down, because it's going to start going down soon. And when it does, it's going to go back down. It's going to be chilling in the 1 minute window. The 1 minute window only shows the last minute. But the 5 minute window and the 15 minute window are still going to be experiencing this for a while. This is a nice thing to know if you do if you ever do web server work and your web servers intermittently get hammered. This is less since we got behind load balancers and that kind of stuff. But when you expose stuff directly out, you'll find that Yeah, so this is already starting to drop. You'll find that acute things that happen very quickly will be shown in the first part of that. But if something's been going on for a long time and still continuing, you'll see it in the 5 and the 15. So that's it's. This is a nice quick heads up for you to see what's going on with the server. Watch, it's going back down. You're gonna see that one is almost. It's just gonna drop off and be done. It's just gonna be chilling, and the 5 minute and 15 minute are gonna very slowly move back. All right. So we check the uptime, and then we start getting into what was going on with the server. So here's what we're gonna do: take a little break, put a little timer up. We'll go on around. I used to always go and check on my dog Ranger, but Ranger has since passed. So what we will do instead here is we will do a timer. What is it? Hourglass. Pull up Hourglass. Take 8 minutes. Quick break. More Linux. All right. Let me put my. Guess I can just do it this way. Turn off the camera. All right. I'll be back, you guys. Oops. Didn't mean to do that. Let's just move this down a little bit. There. Now chat can see themselves really easily. All right, guys. I'll be back. Stretch your legs. Wander around. All right, guys. Still got 4 minutes of break, but clean up my desk area here for a second. couple things real quick while we're still on break here. Let me move this down. Still technically by break, but I want to show you guys something. There is in our Discord some talk of, so last week Sending Grounds did a really good talk on just practicing for interviews, and he's talking about doing that again. So if you guys want to get involved in that, go on there, go respond. Like, and I've been getting a lot of feedback from the people that talked. A lot of them are interested in talking again. They got a lot of good feedback from you guys. So, you know, think about, you know, hanging out, and we'll get more stuff going on in there for you guys. Because again, the goal of this is to get you guys doing this stuff professionally, right? Making you guys see that you can do this. All right, still on break. I'm just gonna sit here a second. Your homemade chicken nuggets are ready. Nice. Yeah. Give me a second to hang out. I did just go get another drink, so I got a few hours, I think, till the wife comes home. So I'm just gonna hang out with you guys. Yeah, we had really good talks this weekend, though. I enjoyed them all. I think I sat through. I actually didn't miss any of the talks. I was there for all the talks. My brother came in and talked about data analytics and telling stories and how you get, you know, how you track whether something you're doing is good or not. Because everybody thinks they're doing good, right? Like, everybody thinks their project is on track, and everybody thinks they're hitting all their performance metrics because, you know, they're getting good feedback and stuff is getting done. But sometimes stuff isn't getting done fast enough, and sometimes things aren't actually meeting the requirements. So that's why you need people that focus on data like him, you know. And then I know King Buns came and talked about making sure people understand how the data will flow in your system, and then having contracts around that, and then everybody adheres to this contract that forms the basis of how APIs are created and data flowing into your system, and how people do requests and what data you need, and just all this stuff that was like super complex on paper, but then it's like when he did it, it was super easy because he just had it all planned out. And it's like going and spending 9 hours to prep for something so that you could do it in 1 hour, right? Like, do it well the one time you need it to actually work. So there were some really good talks, right? And I think people that sat through them enjoyed them and learned a lot. And we're planning on doing more of those. So we'll get more of the people back for more talks, and that's always there for you guys, you know. All right, I'm gonna stop the timer because we're getting at the 1 minute mark. I will pop back on over here because I'm back, sitting here, got my drink, and yeah, it's actually funny. More people talk in Twitch, but sometimes we have more people just sitting in YouTube, so that's fine too. All right, so we're back. Do I have any experience with Lustre losing sync when there are a lot of files in the system? Most far, I have not seen that problem in Lustre. I do pretty big data in Lustre. You know, I do all the weather data in Lustre. And when I say all the weather data, I mean all the weather data on planet Earth is in my systems. So sync problems almost always for me have been big data system, somebody deletes data in one, and maybe it's not fully deleted, like all the inodes haven't been released in another. Although I know it's some other, you know, when you're outside the client, it's some other definition for it, because it's all metadata, right, in the metadata controllers or whatever. So, no, most far, I was on break until right then anyways, but yeah, so no, all I was saying is I haven't seen that. I've seen a few times when there's some sync problems, but almost always like in a couple of big data nodes, and then somebody deletes some data and somebody's like, oh, it's still over there or whatever, but then eventually it gets cleaned up. That's all I've seen it do. I haven't had anything that was like mission critical problems with that with Lustre. But I only Luster's kind of like a side to what I do. I mean, I do some Luster if they need me or whatever, but for the most part, I don't do so much of that. What is it? LS logins? Is that a newer? Guys, I'm an old dog, so I don't know all the new tricks. Oh, ho, 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 ho. Look at that. Oh, man. Oh, yeah. Look at that. That's like, anybody remember Tim the Toolman Taylor? He used to do the, I can't do it, but, yeah, that's a nice one. That's a nice command. I like that more than I should, maybe. Look at that. Is password locked? Is password denied? No, I'm so used, guys. I'm used to doing like, yeah, last. I do mostly last, you know. But LS logins, that might be my new baby soon. That's nice. And we can see if things are locked. Can see if things are denied. Okay, okay. We can do W, who, and who am I. Those are all useful for different reasons. Oh yeah, look at that. Yeah, that's nice. That's got some system and user, I imagine, right? There you go. Yeah, I've never used that. That's awesome. I normally am doing stuff like last, pipe it through more, or I'm looking at like if somebody's trying to log in and I'm helping them troubleshoot a login. I'm doing something with like watching varlog secure or varlog messages. Well, typically varlog secure in rel, and then varlog varlogs. What is it in? Not fail log. Here in Ubuntu systems, it's varlog auth-log. Yeah, yeah. But in Red Hat systems, it's varlog messages. So that's interesting. Yeah, yeah. So there's some good ones there. All right, so we can see what's going on with the system, but sometimes, and this is actually one, I had a good buddy that used to work at American Express, and he had to write a lot of the rules that would go and check scans and stuff. And one of the ones that I think is good to know is you could maybe just grep for like bash out of etc pass wd, and that would tell you who can log in with bash, right? And maybe one of the things that you would always expect, and this is a kind of common search for these applications and stuff that do security scanning, is they would only expect bash to be on under 1, so 0, right? On 0 or above 1,000. Anything else in there is bad, because you shouldn't have logins on your system type accounts. And in modern Linux, 0 is always root. The user ID of 0 is always root. 1 to 200, I think it's in login defs. All right. I should tell you what they tend to be. We can go find it if not. But yeah, right here. Here's the UIDs of most users are 1,000 and above. Your system accounts are 100 to 99 typically. And then 0 through 99 tend to be, they don't even have them defined here, but they are typically the, anything that's added as a software or service type thing tends to be 100 to 999, right? Last log as well. Yeah, for sure. But typically 0 to 99 is the non like software but system specific thing. So we can actually go and we can look for them. Yeah, so daemon, bin, sys, these ones here are the ones that are, under the software that's been added. And then software that's been added like message bus and syslog and systemd resolve. And if I were to add in like Apache or something, it should be higher than that. Although for some reason I think Apache used to be 54. But anyways, there's actually a bunch of checks that they used to write, and the checks all dealt with awks. And I'm not the best awk guy I know, but sometimes you can get away with it. One thing that I like to do in a system is this one here. So I will do, let's just like cat out Etsy pass WD, see the whole thing. And then I like to do one like this. I will awk and look at the fields. Fields are delimited in this file by colons, right? And I will say awk, I only want field, so awk print $7, right? I only want the last field, right? And then I want you to sort them, and then I want you to unique them and tell me the count of them. So now, real quickly, if I were just to look at this and say, are most of the things in this file... Oh, Enzo Bear, I've been using this one a long time. This one's nothing special. This is like me. I'm like a trained bear at this point. Like I can get on the ball and roll around a little bit, and it looks impressive, but it's not anything other than that. Yeah, last log is good. I haven't looked at that one in a long time either, but yeah, that's useful as well for if things were ever logged in, because you might say, well, wait a minute, with some of these, where I was going to go with this though is I was going to show you can do stuff with awk where you only print 4, right? And then you only do that one if, by the way, the other ones wouldn't make any sense anymore. But you would only print that if it were the UID between 0 and 99 or 100 to 199. And I have that somewhere. I don't know exactly where. I have that awk written out somewhere. Hold on. Let me see if I have that. I'll go look real quick in one of my notes. I think I'm looking over here. Where are my... Yeah. So one like this, I actually have some of them. So like if I wanted in the third field, again delimited by and I wanted only the ones that were over 1,000, and then if I wanted the ones that were like back in the day, it used to be over 500. It's actually funny. I originally have this written this way because it used to start at 100, right? Awk's useful, but you can do cut. Yeah, cut. I find that people tend to do one or the other, whatever one they originally kind of picked up. Yeah, so I got a few of these that I had just kind of used. And you can also, by the way, with this, so you could do this one, and you might only print, though, the $1. And this is actually what he used to do, my buddy. He would only want, like, the users if they were over, or in this case, they were greater than 500, because, like, let's say in this case, that was one of the usable users. And then if they had, you could also do another conditional check, and they had bash in their login. So in the last field, they had the word bash, meaning that they were able to log in, meaning that they were out of compliance or whatever, because they were a system account that had bash. Does that kind of make sense? So, yeah. So there's guys, and I tell you guys a lot of times, like, you'll see me do something, but it's just kind of the way I learned it. Find some good, like when you want to dig in, find a good way to do like cut or awk, and make that way your way, whatever it is, because whatever way like works in your workflow is the right way for you. And then later on you can clean it up and you can whatever, but it's like just find the way that works for whatever you need to do. I reference stuff, guys. I don't memorize everything, right? I will learn the things that I need to for the time, and then they'll fade back into note memory, right? Yeah, Audit D. Yeah, we actually have some Audit D stuff we do in some of our labs too. Yeah, absolutely. There's some good stuff in there for sure. So, we were doing Who Am I? Let's look at, for people that have been here since the beginning, I'm going to refresh this page, by the way. So if anybody needs this lab, we're just in our system checking lab. This is a free lab inside of Killer Coda. Doesn't cost you anything. Killer Coda just requires you to log in with like a Google or something. They don't even like bug me. They don't even send you emails or nothing. But then I'm just moving that off to the side and just taking the whole terminal. Free terminal. Be in the same terminal as me. What I wanted to show you guys is I said earlier that we were going to work on Linux and we were going to kind of talk about these basic parts of Linux over here. But we were going to not do it the way that we used to. So when I started Linux, somebody threw you a CD or a DVD and you had to put Linux on a system. And after you did that, then you guys could hang out and talk Linux. But I don't think that's the best way for people to learn. Like, I think maybe that's a nice, like, gatekeeping activity to keep people out. But I think what I think is better is everybody can get in at the command line like this, and the people that hate it just walk out when they're like, I've had enough of this show. I can't stand this shit anymore. I don't want to do nothing with it. Okay, fair enough. The rest of us will be doing Linux or whatever. So anyways, where I'm going with that is, I told you guys that we're not going to do all this history. We're not going to talk about the kernel and all these other things. We're just going to be at the command line typing stuff in. So you're in a bash shell. I told you guys that. But also, the shell that we are in has a bunch of things that it knows about itself. And as we learn more about it, we can configure it. So let's just do like print env. And this is just going to blow up our screen. In fact, I might just do something like this, word count -L. And for everybody that's just kind of been watching me do this and picking this up as we go, when I type something in, I'm using standard input to the command line. And then the system is sending standard out to me. And with this little pipe character, we are catching that output to the screen, and we're using a filter, in this case, word count -L for lines. And I'm just counting up that there's 16 lines of data up here. That is not super easy to see because this is all one line. What would make that easier is actually this other command we kind of like, NL, and that would show us all the number lines. So there's all our number lines. But there's a bunch of things that this environment that I'm in called bash knows about it itself. So here's the bash, here's the shell. It knows that my working directory that I'm currently in is root. It knows that my home is also root. That's useful for me. That is all defined by etcpasswd. Well, this is defined by where I am, but this is defined by etcpasswd. So is this. We come down here. We can see some SSH information. We can see the original user, maybe even before we jumped users to some other user, because we're not currently that user. We're currently the root user. Even though our PS1 variable is this. Our PS1 variable is this, but most people like to see a # when they're root. But we don't have a #. That's because the assumption of root in our system to become the root user didn't assume all of root's variables, didn't go through the whole process. It probably just did like an SU without a dash. Or no, didn't become root. Could we change that? Absolutely. I can change this to a #. I can say echo $PS1. And I can see my PS1 variable, and then I can just say PS1 equals pound. That's my prompt now. That's the prompt that we see for the rest of the time we use this Linux box. No, we can get it back if we want. In fact, if we wanted to get that back, the easiest way to do so would just be to say PS1 equals, and then there's all this mess right here. And because there's all this mess, it's easier to say, you know what? I'm going to put all that mess in a box that is surrounded by single quotes. Single quotes won't be interpolated or tried to be interpreted in any way. And then now I'm back to my original shell. You might notice that variables are called by name, but to tell the system that we want to call a variable, we put a little $sign there. That's a cute little thing you see me putting in there, right? There's a $sign. Okay, that's cool. Agalord said, Sai, here's what my professional opinion is telling me. I need to take a break for tonight. Beyond frustrated trying to set up a VLAN. I hate giving up, but I need to let it go tonight. Agalord, ask it in the Discord, in the networking channel. I've been doing networking for a long time, so I might be able to help you. It depends what you're doing with that VLAN and how professional your equipment is, right? Like if it's a home lab thing, I sometimes tell people to steer away from VLANs, but I do run VLANs in my home lab. So if you need help routing between them, because remember this, guys, anytime you use VLANs, a router has to be involved now. Let me know, because it's 802.1q tagging, right? So yeah, let me know if you need any help with that, Agalord, at least in the Discord, and I'll try to give you a hand with it. But also take a break. Take a break if it's giving you problems. And Too Woke to Toke, how's it going? Hopefully this stuff's useful to you. We're just running through a little evaluation for, I'm not trying to trick anybody. I'm just showing you guys around Linux and telling you like, hey, this is the stuff that maybe you guys can work on and mess with. I also kind of want to put a little black box behind that so it's easier for you guys to see that. Maybe I can do, maybe if I do this. Maybe if I do this and then I move it that way. make it a little more. Where am I at here? Did I move down too far? Here, yeah. Okay, so watch this real quick. We're gonna go back. We're gonna say print env. That's gonna give us a lot of info. Again, we can do print env with a word count -l. We can do just an env and just an env with a word count -l. And that might let us know that print env and env are very similar output. They're very similar things. Hey, thanks for the follows, guys. Hopefully this stuff's useful. Visual effects. Hopefully this stuff helps you out a little bit in some way. Real quick, there's a couple other ones. There's set. Set is going to dump all kinds of stuff all over my screen. But set will show me so many variables, 65. And declare -p will also give me about the same amount of output. So if you want to see that, you might pipe that through more so that you capture it page by page. But look at all this stuff that my system knows about itself. And the reason that this shouldn't necessarily be too exciting to you, especially at first, but what's going to be exciting to you is when you start to do Linux more professionally and you've got to get down in a shell and you've got to do some systems work, you can start to customize the way that that thing behaves. Now, saying that in the spirit of full disclosure, I'm the most vanilla engineer I know. Guys, I have a Discord with like 4,100 other engineers and people that do this stuff. Every one of them customizes their shell more than me. And you say, really, all of them? Yes, all of them. How do you know that? Well, because every time they show me their stuff, I'm like, that's really cool. I'm never going to bother doing that for myself. And the reason I'm vanilla is because I get given a little backpack and I get to walk into all these different environments all the time. I'm constantly in different environments, guys. Like literally daily. I'm doing different stuff in different environments. So because of that, I have some packaged stuff that I bring, but for the most part, I just jump in and do everything new. But look at all these things that I can kind of see about my environment right there, and then I can go modify. And then I can start to learn about how they modify. There's kind of two paths you're going to take to learn how to modify shells. And they go like this. One is as you're using Linux, you're going to learn how to modify stuff. And the other one, and this is where I learned it the most, because again, I'm very vanilla, is helping others, right? Like in my early time when I was doing a lot of admin work with devs would break their stuff. They would break their dot files. And every one of you has dot files. They're hidden. We're very clever in Linux. We hide things with a dot in front of it, and then ls doesn't show it until you say, show the hidden stuff. That's how sneaky we are. That's it. You do a -a, it shows all, even the hidden stuff with dots. Well, the dot files tell the system as your shell comes up how to behave. Now, your dot files also go tell your system to source other dot files. So it can be dot files all the way down, like turtles all the way down, right? Yeah, control byte, that's true. Yeah, you're not going to be getting the fancy fish shell with a bunch of plugins and a skiff. That's exactly right. I've done a lot of skiff work. I do a lot of building systems from scratch. Like they'll be like, hey, it's almost like you guys ever play, like I was playing this game recently called The King is Watching. And The King is Watching is the strategy time building engine game. And you're building and you're keeping your guys out in front of your base so your base doesn't get attacked and crushed or whatever. But what happens is you beat it, and then they're like, all right, now for level 6, we're going to you've already tied both your hands behind your back, and we've already made you do it without your glasses on. Now the enemies are also going to come 40% faster. And to that point of the joke of that is like, that's how I feel like my career is. They're like, all right, now let's drop Scott in a skiff, can't get out to the web, and let's take his phone from him so he can't even check shit on his phone. And let's make it a bright cluster that he's never even worked in before. And let's make it 60 nodes that are some this type of configuration, some this, some are going to be, and let's see if you can do it in 3 days. And I'm like, oh, motherfucker. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. But anyways, my point is, like, there's no amount of customization. I would spend my whole time customizing my shell, right? So I don't, yeah, and you can't wear sandals. Yeah, actually, you guys would be surprised how much I wear my sandals. Well, maybe you wouldn't be if you knew me. Like, I actually, years ago, one of my friends got married. My buddy Sam got married. And one of my other friends said, holy shit, I can't see Scott's feet. What's the occasion? Because we were doing, like, his bachelor party or whatever. But it's actually funny. Like, I'm always in sandals. I mean, you know, I train Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. How else am I going to let everybody know but that I'm always in sandals, right? If I don't have the sandals on, how do they know that I train? I mean, it's not going to be all the muscle on me, right? It's going to have to be something else. I can't wear my black belt everywhere. That, trust me, that, well, that's okay. But people will think I do karate if that's the case. All right. But anyways, we can see all about this shell. And guys, this shell is our shell. It's like, I can't emphasize this enough. It's your home. You can customize this thing out the walls, you can, a lot of people, guys, what's a pretty reasonable customization that I would say a lot of engineers I use know is, or that I know use, is they'll have a GitHub repository that they can pull down and that will configure their shell form. That's a great automation to write. That's a great automation to get into, like for people that want to do that. I just, so lazy. I just don't want to do it. I'd rather just sit around and yell at you guys and make you guys do more Linux, right? Anyway, so, all right. So there's that. There's that kind of thing. I can see what's going on with the shell I'm in. I may even have, guys, I may have other shells in this environment. I might say which KSH, and I might say which C shell, and I might have, no, I don't have any of those shells. I might have other shells in this environment though. And I might be able to say apt install -y CSH, and I may have the C shell available to my user. And then I can go jump down in there and use the C shell, which is very C-like. Now I got user bin CSH. What just happened there? By the way, think about this for a second. So we haven't talked about this. We're in a bash shell, and I just typed the command which found C shell now that we've installed it. You guys all saw me do that. But what happened when I used which? Which did a process of walking all the paths that I have. All the paths I have, all the places I can go in the system are defined by me. That being said, just because I set something as a path doesn't mean I have permissions to get there, but we can look at our path. So my system, when I did which CSH, it found under user bin the program, the executable CSH. So if we go here, we should see user bin somewhere up here. Oh, there it is. There's user bin. But let's do something funny to ourselves. Let's, just for fun, let's say path. I'm gonna break this shit. I'm gonna break this. This is not gonna be good, guys. And let's just say my path equals this. Take that, right? And then we'll come over here. Yeah, this is not gonna work when I'm done with it, because I'm about to lose a whole bunch of things. And let's set my path to that. And now I'm gonna say, I probably won't even have which anymore. Oh, I found it over in bin CSH. Okay, well, so we removed user bin CSH, but there's probably a soft link. Yeah, see how that's a soft link over to... That's the alternative. So we can get rid of the bin path as well, but we're going to lose everything if we do that. But my point is, if I echo my shell now, I have removed path. If I echo my path is shorter than it used to be. And I can make my path longer. I can add or remove things as needed. I could also resource, so in root here, my bash file, my bash RC is right there. I can resource my bash. So we can go read that file if we want and see what it's going to do. But some of the things it's going to do in that bash RC is call the Etsy bash RC, which is kind of like a globally configured one that the mods kind of configure and control. But I'm going to rerun this, and let's go look at my shell now. I just resourced my bash RC like I logged in. It's almost like I come in the front door of my house and I always drop my keys, put my jacket over there, take my shoes off by the stairs, and then I go upstairs and take my socks off or something. Those are the things I always do. Well, I just modified something by effing around with my path, but I want it to go back to the way it was. I'm like, can we come back in the door and pretend and walk through my steps and get me back to a working system because I broke stuff? Let's see if that's where my path was set. And how would I know that? Because it'll be back to the original path. Do you guys see that? In fact, funny enough, it's not back to the original path. Does anybody want to venture to guess why? Guys, I'll tell you why. Watch this. Well, I'll give you a hint to why. Watch this. if we env grep-i to ignore case for user, this is why that's different. It's an interesting one. I just saw that right now. I'm like, wait a minute. Maxim, how's it going over on the YouTube side? We're just working on stuff, doing Linux, kind of evaluating where you guys think you're at, especially for beginners. This is mostly a beginner type stream. It's designed to be beginner stuff. Although I'm kind of going far afield on stuff that maybe somebody that's adminning for a while would do. But why? Think about this. Hold on. Remember I said earlier that when they sudoed up from the KC user, KC internal to root, they didn't actually assume root. They didn't go through the full process of coming in the front door like root. We now know that because this path right here that I had when I started on this system is not the path that I just sourced from the root user. So we had only whatever KC internal had, which by the way, we can go investigate that and look at how he's sourcing his path. We can spend all day digging into this. This is what trouble tickets are for at work, right? Like somebody says, hey, my path doesn't look the same when I'm on this user in the service account as this one when I first hop in. On my user, the system behaves the way I expect. On this other user, but on the same system, the behavior is not the same. I can't sudo, I can't do the commands that I expect as my user. And then we go in and we start digging and comparing and looking at things. You do a lot of kind of sifting through rubble as an admin for sure, as an administrator, helping other people to get the environments the way they need. You're going to do a lot of this kind of stuff. So one thing I would tell you is just play with these commands, play with all this stuff. Get in Linux and do Linux, right? We have a bunch of labs up on Killer Coda. They're all free. Nobody charges you nothing for Killer Coda. All right, so we echoed shell. We did all that. Let's clear this up. Let's look at what's running on the system. So we've looked at the CPU and the memory and the disk and all these things that are happening. And we've done a whole lot. I mean, we've been on for two and a half hours almost, and we've been doing all these things. But now let's look at what's going on. We can use PSAUX. That's going to dump too much stuff to the screen. So I'm going to clear that, and I'm going to pipe PSAUX through more, and that's going to allow me to look page by page at this. I see at the top that there's some headers. These headers might be useful. There's user, process ID is PID, PPID is parent process ID. I don't see parent process ID here. Other commands will show me parent process ID, but I just see the process ID here, so I can only see the process ID. Process ID is how the kernel knows what is happening and knows how to deal with all of the execution of things that are happening with any one process. There's always a process ID. And for the most part, there's always a parent process ID. The only time there's not is if there's zombies, and that's something that you don't ever want to get into. How much CPU and memory they're using at this exact slice of time, and then some other information around how they're using memory, what state they're in, and then the command that originally called them. And this is a fine way to look at the system, right? This PSAUX, and it's ordered by the process ID right here. You can tell that because that's ascending, right? But in all other useful ways, this is not going to do anything except dump everything to the screen. It might be useful to me to maybe say word count -L, and I would know there's approximately 123 processes on this system. And it may help me to know, this is one that I do actually like to use. We can use awk. Awk by default will use the column delimiter of spaces. So this would be the first column, this would be the second, third, fourth column. And I'm going to awk, and I'm going to print $1. So it's going to be just the owner, the user owner, and then I'm going to sort and unique. And I'm just going to see, just as a high level, who's using all the processes on the system. User is just a header, so that's not a real thing. DHCPD, message, polkit-D, root, syslog, and systemd. And if you were to ask me on like a test or something, say, Scott, is this system under any real load, or is this system really doing anything, or is it just basically running like root stuff? And I'd go, it might be a DHCP server, but for the most part, this isn't doing nothing. This server, it's not running Apache, it's not running any kind of database server that I've ever seen. This thing's not doing nothing. Not running any monitoring applications, it's not doing hardly anything. So if you said, Scott, is this server probably a clean server with nothing else on it? I'd go, yeah, probably not much going on with it. But that is an overly simplified way of looking at things, but maybe this is a thing. I tend to like, instead of AUX, I use EF. So let's look at what EF shows. PS-EF, and maybe we pipe that through more. Now this one shows the UID of root, that's a user identifier, and it gives it to us in a human readable way, even though we know that's the user number of 0. We know that from earlier when we were doing ID against it. I tried this command a couple times and could never get it to work, never knew what I did wrong. What are you trying to do, code reader? Is it PS-AUX? Or what command? Show me the command so I know. I will try to help. Oh, yeah, so awk. Awk is an interesting beast. Let me show you awk real quick. So PSEF just dumps stuff to the screen. When I want to filter one way, when I want to filter across by line, I use grep, right? Grep is the something GNU regular expression program or something like that. Regular expression parser. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. Feel free to man it if you want. But let's grep for, in this case, system D. And now this will carve out system D by line. But hold on. But maybe then after I've carved down to just system D here, I just want this column right here. So again, I carved it by line this way. Now I want to carve it this way. And that's where I'm going to use awk. So awk is going to give me, I'm going to say awk, the output of this. And then I want to print, let's say $1 and $2. That's going to give me this column here and this column right here. And maybe even for fun, I want that last column, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 over. But then hold on. In some of these, it's actually not all one word. Look at this one. There's like 9, 10, 11, 12. There's a whole bunch of them. And I say, well, maybe the easiest way for me to do this is I always just want whatever the last one is, which is the number of fields. It'll look at it as a number. And then very quickly, I could at least find what the user ID of something that had system D in it is, what the process ID is, if I need to go dig in on what that process ID is doing, and then also the thing. So let's dig in a little further, because now I determined that whatever this 363 is, user list lib system D udev, that's doing something that I need to go figure out more about. I can LSOF against the process of 363, and I can see what processes and ports and different things this is holding open. So is this touching a file right now? Is this writing to a file or reading from a file? I can see that right here. I can see if it's holding open a stream for a socket for like UDP to come in or something. I can start to like just dig in on all, like, it's almost like I'm sitting. Any of you guys ever watched the way basketball used to be played? I'm not talking like modern basketball, but in old basketball, once you set your foot and it was set, you could pivot on it, but you couldn't start running around again, right? Like I watch all this stuff now, guys. Like all this stuff comes up, and now that I'm talking about basketball, it's going to come up in my freaking Facebook again. But it's wild what is allowed in basketball nowadays. You used to, once you stopped moving, you could pivot on one foot, and that foot would be set. Well, it's kind of the same way, if you want to think of it like that I'm doing here, where I knew that I wanted to search for one thing, so I used grep. Then I wanted to pivot and only see certain things, so I used awk, right this way. Then it filtered down, and then maybe I wanted to use like LSOF to just look at the process ID. I didn't need to use awk first for that, but maybe then I start to pivot to these other things based on what I know. Does that kind of make sense? Yeah, thanks for coming by, Enzo Bear. Yeah, you're probably up early in the morning. But I just want to show you guys that there's like all this information that your system has. Nothing in your system happens by accident, guys. Nothing happens for magic either. It's all real stuff happening. Everything's being treated like a file. That's not like a thing that people just say. That's true. All the file process handles are down in proc. This 363 is in proc. This is all the stuff that represents that process that's running right now in Linux. Whatever that system D thing is doing is right here. In fact, everything I call is just querying this folder anyways. So it's just hard to read this folder by, like, to manually go read this folder would probably drive most of us insane. it's easier to look at the file descriptor info and other stuff like that with commands like lsof, because it pulls it all together and gives it to us in a way that we want and allows us to parse it out the way that we kind of need it to. So there's that. So we did a lot with this command, but suffice it to say, you ps-ef and then you look at it with more, and then you can look at as much or as little as you want. I've got the user ID, the process ID, the parent process ID. And then a thing that I like to show you guys is the process ID of SBIN init, or systemd, as it were, is 1. So things that have typically a process ID, let's see if I can find it. Yeah, see how everything's has got a parent process ID of 2. But all these things that are starting down here, all these systemd things are starting with the parent process of 1. And something that you can kind of know as you're looking at something is, if I knew that this opt-thea, whatever this is, whatever it is, I know that it was started by systemd, whatever this opt-thea thing is. So then I might go systemctl, this is a command I had to know, and I might look for thea. I don't know if that's a real thing, but maybe I look for maybe that's, I don't know what thea is doing. That might just be how I'm connecting in or something. But the point is, you can start to dig in and look at what different kind of things are going on in a system. And maybe, maybe certain things are more interesting to you. Like one that's common is for sure. Let's look at this one. Hold on. Let's look at SSH. So we got an SSH service. That's how we're connecting in. We can do systemctl, and we can do status for like that SSH service to see how it started. It's running. It was started by userlib systemd system ssh.service, but I can also skip all that and just cat it. This will cat that file out for me, and I can see how that file was configured and how we started up SSH. And maybe I want to change the behavior of SSH. In fact, in a lot of systems, especially if we're allowing a lot of users to log in, we'll have SSH on port 22, and that's how users will log in. But we will have an SSH on like 10,000, so 10022. And you say, that's security through obscurity, you can't do it. No, that's not what we're doing. We're not trying to be sneaky like that. What we're doing is we have a separate port that if we ever bog in users logging in over SSH, we can come in on a side channel through this other SSH that is not, it's like a turnstile that is not packed full of people. And then we can come inside the system and go, oh, this is the problem. This user right here is doing something. We kill the user off and everything goes back to flowing. This happens all the time. This is like a common thing in big high-performance compute type systems where we only have a few doors to get in, and then users go to only a few, like, we're already in a terminal, but terminals for a lack of, and then they do other stuff. So, all right. Anyways, guys, there's all kinds of stuff. We can see how much memory we have. We already looked at this earlier. We can see how much memory is free. And then we talked a little bit about basic scripts. This is, again, for you guys that haven't seen this before, what I'm doing in this discussion here, and this is up in the Discord for people that want it, we're doing like an evaluation of, I would use this for like the junior engineers that wanted to become part of my team. And they would just come through and hang out with me, and I would walk them through all this, What do you think about this stuff, and what do you know, and what do you understand? So anyways, this is up in the Discord if people want it. It's for you to look through this stuff and see how well you think you understand Linux in some way, right? All right. So the other thing I had over, was it here? Yeah. The other thing I had was we could do some Socratic Linux. Socratic Linux is one of these things where we just get to a terminal. So if you guys aren't familiar with the Socratic method, what it means is we examine how we know a thing by asking ourselves questions about it. It's used in a lot of ways to like question. A lot of times I've seen it used a lot for like engineers, and a lot for like college professors will use it, which I happen to be one of those. And what it is you think about how you know a thing and why you know a thing, and kind of how you can prove it to yourself to be true, right? So on one of these things it says, can you list the number of CPUs? Well, we did that earlier, but what are some ways that you can maybe lists the number of CPUs. And you can think this to yourself. You might ask yourself a question. Do I know how many CPUs are on the system? Well, I can use lscpu. That'll give me some information about the number of CPUs. I can use nproc. That'll give me some information about the number of CPUs. I can cat proc CPU info. This is one that I used to use. grep-i proc, and we'd see that we just have the one processor. This one was fun, the whole Python 3 one. Somebody showed me this one on stream a while back, and I'm like, that one's pretty good. So Python 3, because that's what we have here. And then we'll just say import multi-processing as MP, right? So it's just your simple import. And then we'll print mp.cpu count. And that shows how many CPUs we have as well. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of other things that we could have done with that, but suffice it to say we can interact with Python on the command line. There's probably some Perl equivalent of that as well, and just stuff that we can kind of mess with. Maxim, what do I miss? I don't think zombie processes are a huge problem. Yeah, we don't see them much anymore. What I know, they don't consume any resource. They're just hanging around in the process table. Yeah, but you'll get problems if they're holding open old inodes, or you're trying to delete like big parts of a system if you can't get rid of them. Only thing comes to mind is we limit the processes if there's even a thing like that. Yeah, we can limit the number of processes that a user or a system runs for sure. We do all that down in etc securitylimits.conf. So we can limit some of that stuff if we need to. And we do sometimes limit users, but then if you find a way to stop users from doing bad shit, they'll find better bad shit to do. That's just how users work. Users are just natively a problem in systems, but we also have systems for users, right? So the next question is, can you tell me that speed in megahertz? Like, how do you know the speed of your system? We can demessage. This is one that I think I used. There's the speed of the processor. lscpu should also give us the speed somewhere. Let's see. Do we have the processor there? I don't see the speed there. You guys see the speed on this one? I don't actually see the speed in megahertz on here. That's interesting. lscpu has let us down. Oh, no, there it is. Yeah, 2.0 gigahertz. Yeah, it was hidden. It's approximately... But that's interesting. This one sees a different speed. But this thing's limited. This one's throttled down probably because of the fact that it's running inside of a container. So it's running inside a Kubernetes container, right? And then also catproc CPU info. So one is reading what the processor is capable of, and lscpu is reading what the system actually can use, which is probably only the 2 gigahertz. All right. Could you tell me the manufacturer of the chip? If I gave you 10 servers and told you they all had Linux on them, could you tell me that one of them had a different CPU processor on it, a different manufacturer? Could you find the AMD box in a list of servers that wasn't running Intel like all the rest? Could you do that? That's an important skill, because you may not be near a data center, guys. I work on servers that are not globally local, like globally close to me all the time. Yeah, so can you tell me the manufacturer? lscpu will do it. It's an Intel. We could also use catproc CPU info. That'll do it as well. I can even see some of the BIOS information of what's handing in the information. I'm on a RHEL 8.6 box. Inside, I'm on a Ubuntu 2404 inside of a RHEL 8.6 box, right? I can also do this lsshow. So lsshow might need to be added, but we can also take that output and get Intel, and we would see that we're on Intel. Or I might say give me Intel or maybe a list. Like maybe I expect it to be Intel or I expect it to be AMD, or I expect it to be maybe, I don't know, maybe some type of like Cray type, processor or something, and then now I can see any of those different ones. And just for fun, just so you guys see that my OR is working, I'm gonna do in VMware as well. Even though this is gonna show more info, that's not true. But I just wanted you guys to see that that's how you'll do an extended grep if you ever need to, and then you have this or this or this, which are inclusive ORs. However, one of them has to be there for it to find it. So grep is a very useful tool as you start to dig into it. You can also do egrep, but egrep is deprecated, so grep-I to ignore case -capital E, and we ignored case, which means that it would find this VMware. It also would have found VM-mouse, which is not something I'm familiar with, but okay. Can you tell me the architecture? That's all the same. Those are all the same types of commands, right? ls CPU. Architecture. Right there. x86-64. uname-m. Architecture. There we go. And these kind of things, like the Socratic Linux, it's not to try to trick you guys. It's not to try to show you like, oh, I know 30 different ways to do stuff. I don't know 30 different ways to do anything. I try to know one way well. And if I don't know how to do something, I try to know how to reference it quickly, which is like generally know what the commands are, and then I can go read the man pages for the command. I would never fault anybody like in an interview if they pulled up a man page in front of me. Or if they told me, yeah, the first thing I would do is read the man page on that because I'm not exactly familiar with that command, but I know like the general idea of what I need. That's what I would, expect or whatever. This one's fun. Can you tell me if the system is physical or virtual? Let's see. ls show or lshow -c system. That's going to tell me that we're on KubeVirt inside of RHEL 8.6, but we're on an Ubuntu box, so we know that we are definitely in some type of virtual environment. 100%. We can do DMI decode. This one is just such a good command for all kinds of stuff. And we can look for system manufacturer. Oops. If I could spell manufacturer right. KubeVirt. There we go. I can do virt what if I have virt what on my system. I'm using the -y so that it doesn't ask me. It just assumes yes. But virt what shows me that I'm on Red Hat KVM. So yeah, I'm in a virtual environment. If I didn't know. I can do ls PCI grep for QEMU. There we go. We see that we're on a QEMU type virtualization inside of Red Hat. That's one. Systemd detect virt will show us that we're virtualized. Also, and this one's not, you would have to be like very far afield to even ever look at what I'm about to show you, but you can do an ls mod and you can look at the modules that you have, and maybe your modules indicate that you're on some type of virtualization, specifically the ones around your network, your where is it at? Again, if you're ever down this far, you probably should have found it before this. Why don't I see net? Often, I don't see it. I don't see it here. I don't see it. Anyways, there's sometimes your network will be it'll tell you in the network tool. I don't see the module loaded though, so maybe it's different on this. But in Red Hat, there's like it's the network module that just has like a virtualization in the name. It's like virt net or. Anyways, I don't see it there. But can you spin up the CPU to a high load? Do you know how to do that? We did that earlier. You can use a stress command. You can go for I in sequence and write a whole bunch of U random and zip it up, and it'll make your system use some work. Open SSL speed dash multi against the number of processors. This one's actually funny. This one will speed the system, or will spin the CPU up on the system pretty high. It just forks a bunch of processes out. And hold on 1 second real quick. I gotta sneeze. Oh man, that was loud. This one will just spin up the CPU, and then if we were to go watch it, we would see it spinning up. But anyways, there's much. By the way, guys, this is linked. This is in our book. The guys put this at the end of our sysadmin book, so it's free right there if you guys want any of this stuff. But you could dig in on memory topics, and really, you just kind of. It's almost like you're quizzing yourself. Do I know how to do these things? Because these are some of the things that, one, we just did, but some of these things are also the things that you need to know how to do as a sysadmin. You know? Stop that real quick, clear this up. Could you tell me what process ID is listening on port 22? Yeah, there's a process ID for SSHD, which is 1187. But I could also... Here's SSHD, and here's his process ID, 1187. And maybe I take LSOF-P against that process ID that I think is listening to it, and I see that he is, in fact, the one that's holding open TCP on port 22. Well, SSH is port 22. We can see that from Etsy services, right? That's where our system maps known IP address or ports of TCP or UDP back to their names, is in Etsy SSH. And if you want me to prove it to you, say, Scott, prove it to me real quick. Watch this. Go to Etsy services, go to this, and say SSH is going to become Streamerland, right? And we rerun that command, and well, we grab right here at the bottom, instead of SSH, it says Streamerland now. It's weird, right? That shouldn't be what it is. It should be there it is. Now it's back to SSH. That mapping doesn't even matter. If I had messed that up, the system would still work fine. It just wouldn't be able to report out that number to name mapping for us. LSOF-I port 22. So we can look at port 22 and see that that 1187 is the SSH port. We know SSH was started by systemd, because systemd with the process ID of 1 is the parent process of this. We can't see it there, but if we do a ps-eo lstart cmd, let's just go cmd and then pid and ppid, grab SSH, we would see there he is, and there's his parent ID of 1. So that's SSHD. Everything maps to everything, guys. Everything touches every other thing. You can know all these things. So as you go through these, if you want to, you'll just be able to ask yourself questions and then figure out more and more of the system either does or doesn't kind of behave the way that you expect it to. All right. So I think that's good for now. We went through those. We didn't really touch any of this stuff. I was thinking of getting into a little of this stuff today, which is our Linux admin course, and kind of showing you guys the things that I think you need to know out of there. But we won't worry about that today. We've got all week to keep working on this stuff. I'll probably just end here and say I appreciate you guys all coming. Let's go to our little end of stream over here. And what we'll do is I'll just keep hopping on throughout the week, telling you guys about Linux, telling you guys about the things that you can do and get better at, and all the jobs that are out there for you guys to kind of work on in that space. We have a whole lot of stuff down in the Discord. It's all free. I want you guys to get into this industry so that I can stop doing it. I just need more people doing it so that I can then leave and, I don't know, go do something else fun. But I appreciate you guys all coming. I will see most of you later on this week. Take care.